You are looking at her. Amy looked at the middle-aged man and nodded. The man looked at Amy solemnly, and then scratched his head. Is the owner of this restaurant your father? Mag heard the conversation at the door and came out. May I help you? He asked, looking at the man in the Catering Association uniform. The Catering Association had disappeared from his life for a long time. After the last battle for the ranking, it was said that the Catering Association was reorganizing. They had announced to the public that the food competition had been stopped indefinitely, and that the Catering Association would take on a new look after the rectification. Mag hadn't heard anything about the Catering Association for 3 months. The man's face brightened when he saw Mag. You must be the owner of Mamie Restaurant, he said, excited. You see, the Catering Association, after reorganization and improvement, is ready to launch an entirely new food competition, and now we're looking for participating restaurants. In the last competition, 5 dishes of Mamie Restaurant entered the top 100. Really impressive. Will you participate in this new food competition? A new food competition? Mag looked at the man, thoughtful. Now that his restaurant was famous, there was no need to increase its popularity through food ranking. Besides, if the procedure was as tedious as before and required him to pay for his own tickets, he had no desire to participate. Seeing the hesitation on Mag's face, the man hurriedly said, the rules of the competition are totally different from those before. Because of the notorious fraud in the past, the result of the competition is no longer decided by guests' votes, but by a review group of 12 anonymous experts, who will eat in each restaurant and then make a fair evaluation. They will rate the dining environment and the taste of food, and then will get the final rankings. In addition to the rankings of 30 best restaurants, there are also 5 sub-rankings, each of which have 20 spots. They are, meat dish rankings, aquatic dish rankings, soup rankings, veggie dish rankings, and snack rankings. No participating restaurant needs to pay any fees. The food reviewers will eat in the restaurants as ordinary guests, and will not inform the restaurants. All participating restaurants must be willing to accept the evaluation from them. The rules sure have changed a lot. Mag nodded slightly. These criteria were similar to those of the Michelin restaurants. Anonymous food reviewers could largely avoid the occurrence of fraud and do a more objective evaluation of food. Having overall rankings and 5 sub-rankings was really convenient. After all, the original purpose of food rankings was to better recommend delicious food to customers. The Food Association seemed to have returned to its original passion. Of course, the more important thing was the simplification of the process. Restaurants only needed to sign up, and didn't have to spend manpower and money on the competition. That was undoubtedly a significant improvement to the previous Catering Association. Yet Mag was still not interested. His restaurant needed to limit the flow of customers now, so there was no point in continuing to attract customers. He was not one who wanted to be the first in everything. New mission, the system called out suddenly when Mag was about to politely decline. Take part in the competition and win first place in all the rankings. What? Mag replied, raising an eyebrow. Your reward for mission completion, a chance at the God of Cookery upgrade wheel. Your punishment for mission failure, dance to Gakuraku Jodo in front of the restaurant in female attire. It was all Mag could do not to curse. How can you be so despicable, system? Mag fumed. Maybe he could take the first place in the overall rankings and 4 sub-rankings, but he could never win the veggie dish rankings, not when he had no veggie dishes whatsoever on the menu. Mag had not even the slightest hope of accomplishing the mission. He couldn't avoid the punishment of dancing to Gakuraku Jodo in female attire. I'm positive you'll find a way to do the impossible, the system, smiling. You'll become a great god. Or a fantastic drag queen. You smug son of a... Mag crushed out his anger as the middle-aged man looked at him with great expectations. Sign me up, he said at last. The man's face lit up immediately. Great. This is the agreement. Please sign here if there is no problem. He handed a piece of paper to Mag. Mag schemed the terms. The agreement was simple, it was similar to what the staff had said before. There were no additional terms. It was just to confirm that the restaurant participated in the competition and accepted the evaluation from the reviewers. He signed his name and the name of his restaurant. I'm sure Mamie Restaurant will get a great ranking, the staff said sincerely, and took his leave. Mag gave a dry smile. Getting the top spot in all 6 rankings. The system was really pushing him to his limits. System, explain to me, why are you so determined to see me dance to Gakuraku Jodo in female clothing? Mag demanded as he walked back into the restaurant in a bad mood. Your task has been released. You should focus on finishing it. As for your question, I choose not to answer it. Mag could hear a smile in its voice. You bastard! Mag mumbled. Mag rubbed his brow with his thumb and forefinger. He was confident he would win the overall rankings and 4 sub-rankings, but how could he manage to take the first spot in the veggie dish rankings? The only dish that hadn't been launched was Peking duck, but there was no way a Peking duck would pass for a veggie dish. Ferris was waiting expectantly for Mag to teach her how to cook, but when she saw his furrowed brow, she became nervous and uneasy. Did I do something wrong? She asked hesitantly in a small voice. Yet Mag was so preoccupied with his own thoughts, he seemed not to hear her. Maybe I can stir-fry some bean sprouts. Ferris's cheeks turned red in a split second. Bean sprout was the nickname used only by her princess, so when she heard Mag say it, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Bean sprout? Amy echoed, looking at Ferris with her big eyes. Big sister bean sprout? I like the sound of it. Ferris opened her mouth and closed it. She looked at Amy's innocent face and nodded with a wry smile. By then, Mag had remembered himself. He cleared his mind and turned to Ferris. Let's go to the market and buy some ingredients for you to practice your cooking skills. Amy needed to study in Urian's place today. Mag took her there, and then took Ferris to the market. Pikachu. A freshly caught Pikachu. Its meat is tenderer than rabbit. A rare first-tier electric-type magic beast. Come and buy it. Ice and fire lotuses, freshly picked from the Kakar mountain, 1,000 gold coins each. They are perfect tonics for prolonging life. Blood python from the Black Swamp, alive. Only 100 gold coins. Don't worry about killing, draining blood, and cutting out the gallbladder, I'll do it for you. Although it's extremely poisonous, its blood and gallbladder are both very nourishing, and they are particularly helpful to detoxify your body. Its meat can be used to make soup, which is divine. Mag and Ferris were greeted by cries of sellers as soon as they entered the market. There were all kinds of beasts and ordinary livestock hanging on meat racks. They had been skinned. Some butchers were killing animals in their stands. The scene was quite brutal and bloody. Mag took a look at the penguin-like creature in the cage at a stand. Although it was yellow and looked just like a Pikachu, it didn't seem to be able to release a 100,000-volt thunderbolt. Its teeth were deformed and rotten. Obviously it could not make a good pet. It could only lie there pitifully, waiting to be eaten. This was the first time that Ferris had come to the market. The sight of bloody meat hanging on racks and beasts struggling in the hands of butchers was too much for her. She hid behind Mag, her face pale like the white of a hard-boiled egg. Mag looked back at Ferris and quickly understood her fear and confusion. He smiled, and said, "This is the market. Residents of Chaos City can buy all kinds of ingredients here, and then they take them home to cook. It's somewhat different from obtaining ingredients directly in the wild. Most of the butchers in charge of slaughter are not hunters. They buy game from hunters or mercenaries, then kill and sell it in the market. Buyers just need to come here to get the ingredients they want. That is the division of labor and cooperation in the market." Division of labor. Ferris echoed, thoughtful. She watched as a man in front of a stall pointed to a piece of meat, paid some coins, and then took the meat directly. The elves of the Wind Forest lived a life of self-sufficiency. Some of the elves were in charge of hunting, and some of them were responsible for cooking. They didn't have to pay for food, unlike the people here. Buying things from people she didn't know seemed strange to her. Markets are product of social development, said Mag. When people produce more than they can consume, superfluous product appears, which can then be traded. The use of currency greatly facilitates the trading of goods. Most parts of the Norland continent are very developed. You can buy almost anything you want anywhere as long as you have money. You elves prefer to keep to yourselves. You don't use money unless you do business with other races. Currency, product. Firis had never used money in the Wind Forest. She could find everything she needed in the forest or in their warehouse. Only then did she realize that the world outside the forest was so different. Let's buy some beef first. I'll teach you how to make beef kebabs today, Mag told Firis, and then he went straight to a beef stand. Making the sauce and adjusting the temperature of the cook fire required skills. The kebabs had to be watched over by someone all the time and kept turning to avoid being burned. Mag had to do everything himself, so he often overcooked some kebabs, and sometimes even burned a whole batch. It hurt him to waste expensive ingredients. It would be great if someone could help him make beef kebabs. Of course, the most important thing was there were many people who ordered kebabs, so he could make huge profits off this dish every day. Mag had first planned to have Firis start with Yongzhou fried rice, but he had thought better of it. It would be much more difficult and take a longer time for her to master Yongzhou fried rice. The eggs had to be perfectly wrapped over the rice grains and not be damaged in the process of stir-frying. All the ingredients had to achieve their perfect tastes at the exact same time. Furthermore, wielding a heavy iron wok required skill as well as strength. So, Mag had decided not to teach Firis cooking Yongzhou fried rice. Besides, Mag could operate 4 woks at the same time. After careful consideration, he felt beef kebabs were undoubtedly the best for Firis to learn. Firis quickened her pace to catch up with Mag. "You'll teach me how to grill cubes of beef over a cook fire?" she asked, her voice full of pleasant surprise. "Yes," Mag said, looking over the beef on the rack. A bright smile bloomed on her face. The way Mag cooked the beef was totally different from what she had seen before. She had never seen anyone cut beef into small pieces and grill them on skewers, but the taste of that dish was to die for. She would soon be able to find out what secrets lay in that dish. She was extremely excited, but she managed to calm herself down and watched Mag select beef. Learning how to choose ingredients was the first step to becoming a good cook. That was what Mag told her on their way here. "I'll have the chuck part," Mag said, pointing. "Could you please cut off the lean meat at the bottom?" "I don't want that. This meat is very good. Stew it in a pot, and you'll get yourself a perfect dish to go with wine." "You really don't want it?" The butcher smiled and picked up the meat. Mag shook his head. "Good as it is, I don't need it." "Okay, I'll cut it off for you." The butcher said nothing more. He cut off the lean meat, weighed the other part, tied it with a length of straw rope, and handed it to Mag. Mag paid the money and took Firis to the next beef stand. Firis looked at the meat in Mag's hand. Thin lines of fat ran through the beef. Beautiful. Yet, she didn't understand why Mag chose the chuck part, because most people preferred to eat lean meat. Mag saw the doubt on her face. Chuck meat is the best when it comes to making kebabs. The fat in it is the secret. Put the meat on the fire. You don't need to brush much oil over it. The fat will melt and come out and make the meat tenderer and juicier, he explained with a smile. But not all chuck meat is good enough. Look at the meat I chose. The fat is evenly distributed, and the meat is fresh. This chunk of meat is top grade, but that one is not, he said, pointing to a piece of meat hanging on a rack. Mag continued to search for top-grade beef while explaining to Firis. The girl listened attentively. She had already gotten totally used to the smells of the market and the scenes of animal slaughter. She asked questions when she didn't understand, and Mag answered them one by one. They visited 5 beef stands in a row, but only managed to find 2 acceptable pieces of chuck meat. Considering it's already noon, I can't complain too much. Anyway, the 2 pieces should be enough for you to practice your skills, I think. When is the best time to come to the market, boss? Asked Ferris curiously. The best time to come is in the morning, when all the ingredients are the freshest, answered Mag, but smart buyers will wait here even before dawn begins to break because that's when the butchers start to work. This way, they get to see the health of the cattle, and the beef cut from the freshly slaughtered cattle is indisputably the best. You are obviously an expert in buying meat, sir, a man running a beef stand cut in. The people who are responsible for buying ingredients for big and small restaurants come here as soon as the market lights go on in the early hours of morning. They place their orders even before the livestock is killed, so you can't hope to buy a good part like a kidney if you don't come early enough. Some people come here that early just to buy the best parts of meat. Ferris didn't understand, but she looked at Mag with admiration. She had seen his attitude towards food, so she was convinced that Mag had to be among those people. Mag nodded. Ingredients are the foundation of food. A great chef can make a delicious dish with inferior ingredients, to be sure, but that dish is far from perfect in his mind. Are perfect ingredients always expensive and rare? Asked Ferris. Not necessarily. In fact, perfect ingredients have nothing to do with price or rarity, Mag said, shaking his head slightly. It's meaningless to use phoenix eggs in fried rice for ordinary people. Different restaurants target different kinds of customers. Know your target customers and make the best food they can afford. That's the basic ability of an excellent chef. Make the best food the target customers can afford, Ferris echoed, thoughtful. There were many kinds of vegetables at the market, such as radishes, cabbages, and green peppers. Mag also found some strange ones that were unique to this world, such as monkey heads and overlords, which opened his eyes to a large extent, but he still hadn't figured out what vegetable he should cook for the competition. The system wanted him to do the impossible, so he judged that he only had himself to rely on to win the veggie dish rankings. Perhaps the system wanted to test his creative abilities in cooking. He could never do such a shameful thing as dancing in front of the restaurant in female clothing. Mag made note of the vegetables he had seen today in his mind. He decided to think about the veggie dishes he had tried in his previous life when he went back. Without the system's experience bag, he felt pressure weighing down on him. It's getting late. Time to get back. It takes time to make sauce. If we go back too late, I won't be able to teach you how to cook kebabs today, Mag told Ferris. He bought some spices at a spice stand, and then took Ferris back to the restaurant. Mag put on his apron, stopped at the kitchen door, and looked back at Ferris, who was tying up her apron around her waist. Are you sure you want to become a cook? He asked suddenly. Ferris thought for a moment, and then nodded solemnly. Good. I hope you can become a good cook soon. I'll promote you and double your salary when you're good enough. Mag smiled and stepped into the kitchen. The temperature of the cook fire is crucial when grilling beef kebabs, Mag said when they were both in the kitchen. It will take a lot of practice to get the hang of adjusting the temperature, but before that, I'll teach you how to make sauce, which is also very important. If kebab is the body, then sauce is the soul. Anyone can grill kebabs, but they can have 100 different tastes in 100 different places. Why is that? Because they use different sauces. As such, how good a kebab tastes depends largely on how good the sauce is. Mag put the spices he had just bought at the market on the table. So how to make the sauce, boss? Ferris asked, looking at Mag nervously. Her learning journey had begun. There are 3 kinds of sauces I make, which are barbecue sauce, spicy sauce, and garlic sauce. The 3 sauces bring 3 different flavors to the beef kebabs sold in the restaurant, which can satisfy most of the customers. Mag smiled. Of course, you can always be inventive and create new sauces, but unless customers love them, you can't use them. Now let me show you the spices you need and how to make the 3 sauces. Firas nodded. Okay. She seldom used spices when cooking, salt was the only seasoning she added in most cases, so she didn't know much about the spices, which had strange fragrance. Mag put the beef in the fridge, and then patiently introduced Firas to the spices. Of course, a chef's best teacher was their tongue and nose. After chewing dozens of peppercorns, Firas memorized the numbing sensation they created in the mouth. Mag taught her how to make the barbecue sauce first. He told her in detail the order in which each spice was added, the amount needed, and the time interval between them. Then he walked out of the kitchen, leaving Firas to it. It had taken Mag several tens of days to master the skills of making the 3 sauces, so he didn't hold out much hope of her making something to his satisfaction by dinner. Mag found a piece of paper and a pencil, and put them on the table. He then poured himself a cup of tea and sat down. It was much more comfortable sitting here than standing in the kitchen. He began to think about the vegetable dishes he had eaten in his previous life that impressed him. Sour and spicy shredded potatoes, braised bamboo shoots, fried corn, one dish after another passed through Mag's mind. He had tried many amazing veggie dishes, but he didn't know which one could beat all the restaurants in the Aden Square and make it to the top of the veggie dish rankings. Which one should I choose? When he raised his head and looked into the kitchen, his eyes widened in disbelief. Spices were flying in a circle around Firas, like the ribbon around a dancer. Green light shone from her body, her eyes closed tightly, she looked as if she were meditating. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open. The spices fell into the bowl in front of her. The soy sauce bottle floated up, the lid came off, and the soy sauce poured into the bowl without her even touching it. More bottles and cans were opened, and various kinds of spices and seasonings were added into the big bowl in an orderly fashion. Look, system. Look. She is using magic to make sauce. That's not fair. Mag called out to the system after freezing for a moment in shock. Wind elements were circling around the body of Firas, adding the spices and seasonings into the big bowl in front of her. Bottles and cans were floating in the air with their lids open. It looked like a miracle to Mag. The system sighed. Everything would be a lot easier if she were my host. Mag didn't know if her magic would make the sauce even more magical, but he was clearly impressed. He looked envious. Magicians sure are cooler than swordsmen. 5 minutes later, the bottles and cans were covered again, and flew gently back to their original positions. Firas looked down at the brown thick sauce in front of her, surprised and happy. The fragrance of the sauce found its way into her nose. It seemed that it was no different from the sauce made by Mag. The pleasant smell tickled his nose the moment Mag walked into the kitchen. Done. He took a deep sniff and decided he liked the mellow fragrance. The aroma alone was enough for Mag to think highly of it. Yes, please try it. Firas looked at Mag, her hands gripping her skirt nervously. Mag walked over. The brown sauce in the large porcelain bowl looked very thick. He stirred it gently with a chopstick, forming ripples on the surface. The mixture was smooth, without any lumps whatsoever. The fragrance is good, and so is the thickness, Mag said. Then he brought the chopstick to his mouth and licked it with the tip of his tongue. He closed his eyes. The mellow taste of the sauce spread across his mouth in a heartbeat. All the different spices and seasonings had contributed a variety of flavors to the sauce, fascinating him. However, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. What was it? Mag's brow wrinkled. He had to admit, though, that she had done quite well on the very first try after seeing him demonstrate it only once. She was absolutely a genius. After all, the sauce he had made for the first time was extremely disgusting, even with the system's experience bag. Her sauce was very good, but it seemed to Mag something was missing. Ferris looked at Mag uneasily. Her heart sank when she saw him frown. Although she hadn't expected to succeed on her first attempt, she had hoped that the sauce would be near the required standard. Mag didn't open his eyes. He licked the chopstick one more time. The kitchen was so quiet she could hear her own nervous breathing. Ugly Duckling raised its lazy head from the counter, only to drop it back down again when it saw what they were about. After what seemed to be several minutes, Mag opened his eyes, put down the chopstick, and looked at Ferris. "Did you use magic to stir it?" "Yes," Ferris answered hurriedly. "I used a miniature tornado to drive the sauce to rotate so that everything can be mixed up completely." "Is there a problem?" "No wonder." Mag smiled as Ferris kept a tense expression. "You have combined everything almost perfectly, but the soul of your sauce is lost." "The soul?" Ferris was as confused as she was depressed. Mag saw the discouraged look on her face. "Don't lose heart. You did a much better job than I had when I tried making it for the first time. The sauce I made was just awful. You mixed all the spices and seasonings very well. The quantity and order of them were well controlled, and there were almost no defects and errors. You should be proud of yourself." Ferris's eyes brightened again. "But good food has a soul," continued Mag. "Precision is just one of the many key elements. Only when you feel the change of food with your heart and hands can you infuse the soul into it." "So should I abandon magic and cook with my hands?" Ferris asked. Mag shook his head. "No. Your talent in magic is your advantage. It can make you control more accurately. You don't know how many chefs wish to have the power that you have." He pointed to the sauce in front of him. "There is only one thing you need to improve. Use your hand instead of magic to mix the sauce. Feel the change of everything, and use your heart to feel the critical point where everything is perfect. Your sauce will be impeccable when you find that point. Although magic is convenient, that critical point can only be felt by your hands. Remember, overdoing is as much to be avoided as underdoing." Critical point. After thinking for a moment, Ferris's eyes suddenly lit up. She finally understood why Mag was such a great chef. He didn't just cook with his hands, he cooked with his heart, and he became one with the food and the tools he used when cooking. Ferris was a good cook herself. She had thought cooking was boring and difficult, so she had seldom used her hands, let alone heart. Mag's words were like a beam of light, lighting up her way. She could cook with precision, but the soul of a dish lay in the chef's devotion. "Try again," Mag said with a smile, and then left the kitchen. "Not even enough. Try again. The thickness is wrong." "No." Mag sat at the table, tasting the sauces made by Ferris and making brief comments. He had lost count of how many times he had said no, but she was not even a bit disheartened. Her determination never wavered. The sun crept slowly towards the western horizon. Mag looked at the clock on the wall. It was time to prepare dinner. When he was about to stand up, Ferris came out with another bowl of sauce and put it gently in front of Mag. She looked calm, but the expectation in her eyes was hard to hide. Mag looked at the sauce. It was thick and smooth, and smelled wonderful. He dipped a chopstick into it and tasted it. His eyes widened. A familiar and delicious taste exploded on his tongue. It was rich and strong, just the way he liked it. "Is it bad?" asked Ferris nervously. "No, it's just perfect." Mag put down the chopstick and stared at her like she were a treasure he had found. Ferris flushed under Mag's stare, but she was also over the moon. She had searched for the critical point that Mag had told her the whole afternoon. After countless trials and errors, she had finally understood the characteristics of those spices more deeply and found the critical point this time. It was a very strange feeling. She had stopped stirring the sauce when a voice suddenly sounded in her head, telling her to stop. "Congratulations! You have mastered the mixing of barbecue-flavored sauce. I'll teach you the other two sauces next time. Now let me show you how to grill kebabs." Mag got up and went to the kitchen. Firas smiled excitedly and hastily followed after. Grilling kebabs was easier said than done. Firas had so much to learn: how to control the fire, how to turn the kebabs to cook them evenly, when to brush the sauce, and how to tell when they were cooked to perfection. These skills could only be obtained through a large amount of practice. Cutting beef into cubes and skewering them was effortless to Firas. She could do it much quicker than Mag with the help of magic. In order to train her, Mag asked her to cut all the beef he needed for tonight and had her skewer it with bamboo sticks. Then he asked her to cut up all the other ingredients for other dishes, and told her it was also to train her cutting skills. Mag watched as evenly chopped pieces of ingredients fell into several large containers. Each and every piece was so beautiful that even he himself couldn't do better. He looked at Firas, who was now surrounded by many tiny wind blades. She's like a cutting machine, Mag thought to himself. Mag used to take 2 hours to prepare the ingredients, but Firas finished it in half an hour. Mag then happily started teaching her how to cook beef kebab. He told her about the advantages of beef kebabs and the temperature range of the grill, and taught her when to do what and how to do it. He was patient and meticulous. But still he worried it might prove to be too difficult, especially for one who was new to kebabs. It had taken him dozens of days of practice to make the kebabs acceptable to the system, and that had been with the help of the experience of many master chefs. Of course, he had the patience to wait. It was not easy to become a chef. The good thing was she had talent as well as basic skills. Firas listened attentively. Grilling kebabs was not of the same difficulty level as making sauce, she could tell just by listening to him. I have taught you everything you need to know. Remember the taste and then recreate it, Mag said, handing over one of the 2 kebabs he had just cooked to Firas, and walked out of the kitchen, eating the other one. Firas had helped him finish the preparation of ingredients in advance, so he had 1 more hour to rest today. Firas looked at the beef kebab in her hand. The strong aroma of the beef and sauce made her mouth water. The sauce was made by her, while the beef was bought at the market. The fat parts of the beef looked like small crystals. The sauce was well distributed. The surface of each piece was covered with grease. It looked very tempting. After a short hesitation, Firas opened her mouth and bit off a piece of beef. Her beautiful eyes went round when her white teeth bit into the meat. Tasty juice came out and mixed with the sauce, stimulating her taste buds. The sauce made the beef even more flavorful. The more she chewed, the better it tasted, so she naturally chewed faster and faster. It was an interesting virtuous circle. She chewed happily until she swallowed the meat into her stomach, yet the pleasant taste still lingered in her mouth. This beef kebab tasted a little different from the ones she had had for lunch. Perhaps that was because she now had a much deeper understanding of this dish now that she had seen firsthand Mag's wisdom and skills in making the sauce and grilling the kebabs. She finished her kebab in no time at all. She licked the sauce off her fingers, her eyes shining with determination. She looked at Mag, who was writing on a piece of paper, took a deep breath, and picked up a raw beef kebab. Eggplant with garlic sauce, maybe this dish will help me win the competition, Mag whispered. Mag's eyes suddenly brightened after crossing off countless dishes. He wrote down eggplant with garlic sauce on the paper and then circled the 4 words. Eggplant with garlic sauce was one of Mag's favorite dishes. He also liked grilled eggplant, which was a famous street dish that could bring happiness to anyone who ate it. Mag still remembered the taste of the eggplant with garlic sauce he had tried in a small restaurant in Sichuan province. Authentic or not, it was the best eggplant with garlic sauce he had ever had. He had made a second visit to that place later, only to find a new building standing where the old and shabby restaurant should have been. It had been demolished. Fortunately, on a whim, Mag had asked the owner there about how he had cooked it. The man clearly hadn't intended to keep it a secret. He had happily shared his experience with his curious customer. Mag searched his memories, and found he could still recall the ingredients and steps. Yet knowing the ingredients and steps was not enough to make the dish magnificent. He had to figure out the amount of spices and seasonings, the temperature of the stove, and the most important thing, how to make chili broad bean paste. Chili broad bean paste was the most necessary ingredient in this dish, which was also one of the most important seasonings in Sichuan cuisine. It could be found in the kitchen of almost every family in Sichuan. In the eyes of many residents living there, eggplant with garlic sauce was not authentic without chili broad bean paste. Adding some chili broad bean paste into the hot oil would give the dish a distinctive flavor, resulting in a pleasant and persistent aftertaste. The chili broad bean paste was essential in twice-cooked pork slices with green peppers and dongpo pig knuckle, as well as in eggplant with garlic sauce. Making bean paste was also a must-learn skill for every housewife in Sichuan. Of course, Mag didn't have this skill. However, as a fan of Sichuan cuisine, he had criticized many Sichuan restaurants. In order to make himself look professional, he had made several trips to Sichuan's Pixian County to watch the residents there make the chili broad bean paste. He hadn't asked them for the recipe, though. Now he only vaguely remembered the ingredients and steps. Mag looked at the steps and ingredients he had written down and sighed. What I know right now is too little. I need to practice a lot to figure out the best recipe. The competition will start in 5 days. I don't know if I can make the eggplant with garlic sauce perfect by then. The restaurant would open soon. Mag decided to use eggplant with garlic sauce to compete with other restaurants, but he needed to conduct many experiments to determine the amount of ingredients and seasonings needed for the dish. This dish was undoubtedly a new challenge for Mag because he didn't have the experience and recipe of the master chefs this time. He not only needed patience, but also had to use his understanding of cooking so far to make the dish to his satisfaction. He put away the pen and paper and walked towards the kitchen door. Firas hadn't brought out a beef kebab for him to try. He was a little curious about her study progress. It seems that her talent in cooking doesn't include kebabs, Mag thought. He stood at the door, smiling at Firas standing nervously in front of the grill. Her smooth forehead was covered with tiny beads of sweat, her eyes fixed on the kebab on the grill. She held the kebab in a stiff hand as if she were holding a bomb that would explode at any moment. The failed kebabs were piled up on a plate beside her. Some of them were burnt black as charcoal, some of the bamboo sticks were burnt, and some were half-cooked. There was not even one beef kebab that looked edible. Mag took a look at the charred beef kebab in Firas's hand, and walked into the kitchen. He looked at the frustrated Firas with a smile, and said, "I used to burn them like you." Firas turned around and looked at Mag in disbelief. "But you're a genius chef." "No, actually I'm not. I'm just luckier and more diligent than others." Of course, the main reason is that I'm lucky, Mag thought to himself. Confidence returned to Firas's eyes. Mag dumped the failed kebabs on the plate into the garbage can, cleaned up the stove, and smiled at Firas. "Your training today is over. You will start work the day after tomorrow. You will be responsible for all the cutting work. Practice in the restaurant in your spare time. If you have something to do tonight, you can go ahead and leave after dinner, or you can stay here if you want. I'd like to watch you cook if you don't mind." Firas looked at Mag with bright eyes. Maybe she used to worship only her princess, but now she worshipped one more person. Mag nodded. "Sure. I'll find you a place to stay tonight." He was happy that Firas was studious. He hoped that she could grow into an excellent cook as soon as possible, because then she could do more kitchen work for him. Mag had decided to change the dorm where his employees now lived to 4 bedrooms. Their house was large enough for 2 more rooms. "How do you want your room decorated?" Mag asked suddenly, looking at Firas, who was cleaning up the kitchen. The girl didn't understand. "My room." "Yes. Your room. You can live with other employees in a big house," Mag explained. "How do you want it decorated?" He had given up on guessing what a woman liked because of what had happened before. Firas felt warm inside. No one had ever cared about her or considered what she wanted except for the princess. Now she met Mag, who taught her to cook and offered her a place to stay. Her heart was pounding as she looked at his kind smile. I like it simple. I don't need it to be fancy. She lowered her head and stole a glance at Mag. Am I asking too much? No, of course not, Mag said, smiling. You're asking too little, actually. She was too shy, but a simple room would save him a lot of money. System. Mag called out. He haggled with the system and bought a room for Firis for 30,000 copper coins, including decoration and furniture. Father. Amy said as soon as she stepped into the door. My friend's parents are going to the parent-teacher meeting. Will you go there too? Mag was surprised. Parent-teacher meeting. He looked at his daughter with her school bag on her back. Krasu and Urian came to his house every day, and they only had one student. Did they really need to hold a parent-teacher meeting? Amy nodded. Yes. Daphne told me about that after school. Everyone's parents will be there. You'll be there too, right? She looked up at Mag expectantly with her big blue eyes. Now he understood. The parent-teacher meeting was held by the Chaos School. Krasu had never notified him of this meeting, and although Amy went to the Chaos School every day, she had no classmates studying with her, so it would be really strange for him to attend that meeting. Yet he couldn't turn his little girl down, not when she was looking at him like that. He stroked her head with a smile. Of course I will. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Thank you, Father. Amy jumped up and down with excitement, swinging Mag's arm back and forth happily. You're the best. Firis smiled as she looked at them. She felt envious and happy all at once for the loving father and daughter. There is one problem, though, Amy said. Her excitement had given way to sadness. Daphne says 2 parents should both attend. I see, Mag said, thoughtful. Then his face lit up. What about we find someone to pose as your mother? They both looked to Firis. The female elf froze for an instant before understanding what was going on. She could hear her heart thumping in her chest. She had promised to babysit Mag's daughter, but she never signed up for this. Yet Amy was so adorable and Mag had raised her up all by himself. Her heart went out to him. Amy will be isolated by her classmates if her mother won't show, Firis thought. Posing as her mother, it's not that difficult. I can do it. No, Amy said, shaking her head. Big Sister Beansprout's breasts are too small. Mag nodded his agreement. And she's too young to be your mother. Firis. It snowed all the year round on the Frost Island. From time to time, a snow-white frost dragon glided across the sky. The buildings standing in this ice and snow world looked like many huge ice cones, magnificent and beautiful. In a grand castle, 6 people were sitting at a table. Fox was at the head, and the other 5 were old with grey hair. Unless you can prove Rankster is dead, Douglas won't approve of you sitting on the throne, said the old man sitting at Fox's right hand. Another old man nodded. Rankster was badly injured during his fight with Alex, and then he went missing with Alex 3 years ago. We have searched the whole continent, and only found some of his personal effects. His body has never been recovered. Fox snorted. His fire burned out 2 years ago. You all know what that means. It means he's dead. Is Douglas too blind to see that? Or did Rankster hit him so hard in the head that he is unable to use his head to think? His fire here has burned out, yes, but the one in the Golden Dragon clan hasn't, low as it is burning, so he is alive, or at least his soul is. Rankster is hard to kill. Everyone knows that. The table fell silent. Loath though Fox might be to admit it, it was true. Rankster was indeed very hard to kill. Rankster was a legend. His father was a royal member of the Frost Dragon clan, but he had a golden dragon for a wife. Frost dragons and golden dragons were at war with each other when his father fell in love with his mother. Countless dragons had been killed. Hatred was spreading like fire. Both clans wanted to murder Rankster when he was just a fetus in his mother's womb. When he was born, his mother risked her own life and took him back to his father on the Frost Island. Douglas, who was then the chief of the Frost Dragon clan, carried the baby into the sea and let the waves wash him away. When everyone thought he was dead, he came back 20 years later, and began his legendary life. He killed countless powerful dragons of both the Frost Dragon clan and the Golden Dragon clan, and fought his way to the very top, forcing Douglas to abdicate and give the throne to him, and putting an end to the war between the two clans which had lasted over 1,000 years. He had been rumored to be dead many times, but he had come back every time, stronger than ever. He had earned himself the nickname King Immortal. Just his name alone was enough to strike fear into most people. He had been one of the 3 strongest dragons on Dragon Islands. About 10 years ago, he met Alex, who was also a most fearsome fighter. Their power shook the Dragon Islands. The deep rift across the main island spoke volumes about how fierce their fight had been. Rankster lost, and was severely injured. He went into seclusion. Alex won, but was also badly injured. He recovered later, and embarked on his dragon-slaying journey. No one knew how bad Rankster's injuries were. He had never gone into seclusion because of his injuries before. His seclusion lasted 7 years. 3 years ago, word of Alex being ambushed in Rodua found its way to the Dragon Islands. Rankster came out of seclusion, and then went missing. Some said he didn't believe Alex was dead and had gone looking for him. The others said he had committed suicide because his life was meaningless now that his rival was gone. One thing was certain, the Frost Dragons had no leader to guide them now. So, naturally, there was a lot of discussion about picking a new leader. Most Frost Dragons had wanted Douglas to assume the crown, but to their surprise, he refused. He suggested holding off finding a new leader, and wanted to locate Rankster first. He told them that even if they couldn't find Rankster, the crown should go to a young dragon. He believed the Frost Dragons needed young blood to lead them. With Rankster nowhere to be found, many young dragons couldn't help but feel tempted by the throne. Fox was one of them. He was Rankster's half-brother, and they were close. He was a 9th-tier dragon. Of course his power couldn't hold a handle to that of Rankster, but he was one of strongest in the younger generation. Another popular candidate was Elizabeth, Rankster's daughter. She had the pure blood of the Frost Dragons in her veins and was talented just like her father. She had reached the 7th tier before adulthood, and she had the potential to reach the 10th tier before she turned 100 years old. Considering that dragons could live for thousands of years, she would definitely go far. However, since her father had killed many Frost Dragons and his mother was a golden dragon, not many people wanted to see her on the throne. Yet Douglas seemed to quite like her, so many Frost Dragons chose to sit on the fence. The Golden Dragons supported Elizabeth, of course. After all, her grandmother was a golden dragon. The throne was tantalizingly close, but Fox couldn't reach it. If not for Elizabeth, he would have already become the king of Frost Dragons. Fox clenched his fists in anger. Alex is not dead, so Rankster will challenge him to a duel again if he's also alive. If he ends up dead, the crown will pass on to me. That's not going to happen, said a cold voice. Not when Elizabeth is alive. Big sister Mia has horns, but I have no horns, so she can't be my mother, said Amy. Big sister Babla's breasts are also small. Very small. Too small. So, she won't do, either. Babla blushed but said nothing. Amy and Meg looked at Sally in unison. Amy nodded. Big sister Aisha is beautiful and mature, and she's an elf. She can pass for my mother. Then she turned to Meg. Big brother Blower would look gorgeous in female clothing, I think. She smiled. He could pose as my mother too if you don't mind, father. I mind. Meg said hurriedly. Have you tried the new dish? The one that smells like feet that haven't been washed in years? No. And I don't plan to. Yet. It's stinky as hell, so don't bother trying it. After all, they only serve 100 portions each day. The guests waiting outside the restaurant were chatting away. Obviously stinky tofu had beaten tofu pudding and become the new most popular topic of conversation. Carla, don't tell me you're taking me here to try this new dish they're talking about, a girl in a purple golden outfit said with a worried look to her friend in pink standing in front of her. Her name was Christy, a manager at a branch of Buffett Banks at the young age of 23. She had only worked there for 5 years, but her outstanding performance had secured her fame as well as a high position. Carla was her bestie. Her family owned over a dozen mines in the Goblins' territory. They did business together on a regular basis, so they naturally had become best friends. Carla was a serial eater. She liked hunting for tasty and weird food, and always dragged her bestie along with her. Christy wasn't a big fan of food, but she accompanied her whenever she could. She never ate food which had a strong and unpleasant smell, for most of her clients were members of the upper class, and she had to keep her breath nice and sweet at all times. Tonight she had to attend a formal dinner, over which she had planned to seal a major deal with an important client, so she couldn't allow anything with a foul smell to pass her lips before that. Carla had asked her several times to come to Mamie restaurant, but she had been quite busy. Her banquet tonight wouldn't start for a couple hours, so she decided it wouldn't hurt to grab a quick meal with Carla after she badgered her over and over again. She planned to go home and change into her formal dress after eating here. No. When did I ever disappoint you? I'm telling you, the owner here is amazing. He even cooked for the king of the Roth Empire not long ago and won first prize. Can you believe that? You definitely should try his cooking. Carla leaned over and whispered in Christy's ear, and he is super handsome. Your type, I think. Stop making fun of me, Christy said with a smile, touching Carla's head. She was intrigued by the owner who had cooked for the king, though. It's annoying that I can't eat as much as I want. Abraham sighed. But the doctors said pretty much the same as Mag had said, so I guess I have to take their advice and try and avoid an early grave. This way, I'll enjoy several more years of good food. Welcome. Please come in. The door opened with a ding, and Mag stepped out with a smile. Christy blinked at him. Mag's tight-fitting black and white chef's suit made him look tall and well-shaped. Unlike other cooks, he was clean, his apron stainless. His skin was fair, his eyes clear and black, and the mustache on his attractive face making him look more mature. He's quite good-looking, right? He has a daughter, though, and she is also very cute. You'll get a little angel for a daughter if you marry him, Carla said, smiling. Christy looked surprised. He has a daughter. That was when Amy stepped out from behind Mag. Don't make trouble while eating, please. Follow the rules, or I'll get angry. Trust me, you don't want to make me angry. She was an adorable half-elf, but she was talking like a grown-up. The crowd couldn't help but smile. She's so cute. Whenever I feel down, I come here. The food and little Amy never fail to make me feel better. She's the owner's daughter? So lovable. I love the way she talks. I'll definitely eat here tonight. If only I could marry him. He's handsome and knows how to cook. His daughter is cute and powerful. I'd give anything to marry him. The crowd was excited at the sight of Mag and Amy. She's indeed very lovely. Christy found, to her surprise, she couldn't tear her eyes away from Amy. She was a workaholic. She had thought babies would be nothing but an encumbrance to her, yet looking at Amy now, she found herself desiring a girl just like her. He is single, I hear. You should make your move on him, Carla jested. He is the most eligible bachelor in the whole city, but I'm willing to hand him over to you. Don't worry, I'll pay even after you've become the boss lady here. Just promise me you'll sell me one more tofu pudding every day. They are better than any skin creams. Christy felt Carla's forehead with her hand. You're not having a fever, but why are you hallucinating? He is not yours, so it might be a little tricky for you to hand him over to me. Besides, I don't feel like becoming a boss lady here. I have my own career to worry about. Carla took Christy's hand off her forehead and smiled. I know you always put your career first. But, that may change after you have tried the food here. Come on in. Mag said, stroking Amy's head. His daughter was his security guard, whose job was protecting the restaurant and keeping customers from dining and dashing. And she was really good at her job. Mag and Amy stood aside to let them in. The regulars greeted the father and daughter as they headed into the restaurant. Mag welcomed them warmly. You look really sharp today, Boss Mag, Carla said, giving him a sweet smile. Father looks sharp every day. But no second helping of tofu pudding for you, big sister, Amy said before Mag could reply. Carla, Mag's lips curved in a smile. You're not looking too bad yourself, he said to Carla, who always asked him to sell her more tofu pudding. Of course, Mag turned her down politely every time. Christy was shocked. Other restaurants treated her friend as an important guest, but clearly she couldn't even get a second helping of tofu pudding here. She smiled at Mag courteously, took another look at Amy, and followed Carla in. Mag's eyes lingered on Christy for a moment. She was so attractive that even Mag couldn't help but stare at her. Her golden hair was tied neatly and beautifully at the back of her head, her purple golden ensemble somewhat like what a lady in his previous life working in an office would wear, her brown eyes giving off such confidence. Mag recognized the emblem on her front. The picture was not strange to anyone living in Chaos City. She holds a pretty high position in the Buffett banks, I think, Mag thought to himself. He glanced at the information displayed by the omniscient door. Christy, female, 23, body functioning well, save for inflammation of a small part of the stomach lining. Mag shook his head. Young people tend to work too hard to remember eating at regular hours. Such a young manager. She must have worked her *SS off to get where she is today, or she has slept with Sheer. But there is no way Sheer would let anyone share her bed, so this girl must be very good at what she does. Smiling, Mag made his way to the kitchen. We only supply 100 portions of stinky tofu in the evening every day, so each customer is limited to one portion, Yabimiya announced with a smile. Those who want to order stinky tofu, please sit in this area. Only 100? And one portion each? That's too stingy. Even the rules about tofu pudding are not this unpleasant. The ones who had tried stinky tofu yesterday were clearly not quite pleased, but there was nothing they could do but complain and come earlier. Let's sit over there, Christy, Carla said, dragging her to the stinky tofu area. Yet Christy didn't move. You want to eat that stinky tofu? You'll like it too, I promise. One bite, and you'll fall for its fantastic taste. Christy shook her head. It's stinky. If you really don't want it, Carla whispered, order one for me. I can only order one myself. Come on, Christy, do it for me, said Carla, putting on a pitiful look. Christy was resigned, she knew how deeply her friend loved food. Fine. I have a feast to attend tonight, so I'll just eat a little. I'll recommend something good for you, Carla said, smiling. But no one can only eat a little here. The food here is so good, I've never seen one leave with food unfinished. Then I'll be the first. Carla and Christy sat opposite Abraham and Harrison. They nodded at each other as a greeting. Christy looked around and found herself sitting in the cleanest restaurant she had ever seen, picky as she was. The tables, the chairs, the floor, the ceiling, and even the dark corners behind flower pots, everywhere was as clean could be. The air was fresh and moist. Christy thought she could smell mint, which made the air even more wonderful to breathe. She didn't like the idea of sharing a table with strangers, yet Carla didn't seem to care, nor did other customers. She was stunned when she saw an elf sitting with a demon, but she never gave her confusion voice. Out of a professional habit, she looked over the two guests sitting opposite her. One was wearing an expensive-looking robe, fat, with a thick gold chain around his neck. She deduced he was a new rich from a not very big family. The other one was dressed in a grey silk robe, around 40. Christie's eyes went wide as they dropped to the emerald ring on his right thumb. She recognized the material. The emerald was from a mine in the Phyllis Mountain on the main island of the Dragon Islands. It looked just like normal emerald, except for the golden threads in it. Wearing a ring made of this kind of emerald would keep the body warm when it was cold, or cool when it was hot. To put it shortly, it was able to help regulate body temperature. The production of Phyllis emerald was so small that it was extremely hard to come by outside Dragon Islands. Dragons seldom sold it. They collected it as treasure. Whenever a piece of emerald found its way to an auction on the Norland continent, it would always fetch a fortune. As such, the man wearing the emerald ring had to be extremely wealthy or have really a high position in society. I don't recognize his face, so he can't be an official from the city lord's castle or the Grey Temple or one of the wealthiest men in the city. Duke Abraham is rumored to have come here and exchanged for some gold coins. Could it be? Christie looked surprised. But even the city lord has to treat Duke Abraham with respect. In here, he has to share a table with lowborns? Before Christie recovered from her shock, Abraham looked around and leaned over. "Are you here to eat stinky tofu, kids?" he asked Christie and Carla in a low voice. "Can I buy some from you? I'll pay 5 times the price." Christie was even more shocked now. She didn't know what to say. Duke Abraham wants to buy stinky tofu from us? What on earth is this stinky tofu? Why is everyone so obsessed with it? "I'll pay 10 times the price for your portion, old man," Carla whispered, leaning forward. "What do you say?" "Abraham, you're even crazier than me," said the Duke. The two stinky tofu lovers exchanged a smile. That was when Yabimiya walked over to their table. "May I take your orders?" she asked, smiling. "Yes. I'd like a braised chicken and rice, a sweet tofu pudding, and a stinky tofu," Abraham said, closing the menu. "I'll have a Yangzhou fried rice, 10 beef kebabs, 5 spicy and 5 barbecue flavored, a savory tofu pudding, and a stinky tofu," Carla said without even looking at the menu. Christie opened the menu and looked at the pictures of the dishes. They all looked really inviting. For a moment she didn't know which ones to choose. Carla smiled. "You like beef, so how about a pepper steak? And you must try tofu pudding, I recommend the savory flavor. It's divine. And a stinky tofu. That will be enough, I think." "Isn't that too much?" Christie asked her friend hesitantly. Carla smiled. "Hardly. It's nothing compared to what I have ordered." Christie thought about the dishes Carla had just asked for and smiled. She closed the menu, turning to Mia. "That's all," she said. Yabimiya nodded. "Okay, please wait a moment." The young waitress headed for the next table. One order after another went into the kitchen, and Mag began to get busy. Ferris stood in the corner and looked intently. Mag's culinary philosophy and cooking style were completely different from hers. The varied kitchenware played a wonderful role, making her amazed. Watching him cook was much like enjoying a performance, ingredients rolling and jumping happily in the woks, flames jumping up into the woks from time to time and dancing fiercely, and all kinds of wonderful scents filling the kitchen were swallowing her whole. Steaming food was brought out of the small kitchen and delivered to the guests' tables. Words of praise found their way into the kitchen. Ferris gazed at Mag, eyes shining with admiration. "Yangzhou fried rice and black pepper steak, enjoy." Mia placed the two dishes in front of Carla and Christie before walking towards the next guest. The scent of the red wine mingled with the aroma of the steak, flooding Christie's nostrils. She detected another faint smell, strange but inviting, yet she couldn't place it anywhere. Her eyes lit up. As a manager of the buffet banks, Christie was no stranger to fine restaurants. After all, it was easier to do business at the dinner table. She might have tried all the upscale restaurants in the city, but she was still stunned by the aroma of this black pepper steak. A large piece of beef with beautifully distributed fat sat on the plate, steaming. The thick sauce lying on the top and the red and green bell peppers on the side made the steak even more tempting. "Go ahead. You'll love it," Carla said, spooning some fried rice into her mouth. A blissful smile appeared on her face. "I can't eat much. I have to wear a dress tonight." Christie picked up the knife and fork. The knife glided through the tender steak, and red wine seeped out along with red meat juices. The aroma of wine in the air became even more noticeable. The brown steak was cut open. The center was pink but not bloody. She forked a piece into her mouth. The beef was even more tender than she imagined, and as she bit into it, an abundance of wine and meat juices flooded into her mouth. These flavors then combined with the black pepper sauce, and she felt as if a magic caster had unleashed a spell directly in her mouth. All of her taste buds were cast into a state of complete ecstasy. After chewing and savoring the beef carefully, Christie's expression abruptly changed. Aside from the amazing flavor of the beef itself, the fragrance of the wine also blossomed in mouth, adding a new layer of complexity to the extraordinary flavor of the dish. This was a combination that was simply irresistible. The flavor of the beef wasn't drowned out by the black pepper in the slightest, yet the black pepper featured prominently in the dish, taking the flavor of the beef to the next level and also contributing a unique texture to the dish. The complexity of the flavors made her feel as if she were experiencing something new and different with each passing second. After swallowing the mouthful of beef, she felt as if a flow of warmth had slid down her throat, filling her entire body with a warm sensation that almost made her moan with pleasure. A moan escaped her lips as her mouth opened. The intoxicating aroma of the red wine still lingered between her teeth, but the taste buds on the tip of the tongue had already begun to crave the next close encounter. Christie opened her eyes and blushed. She had never made such an embarrassing sound before. The impact of the steak was so powerful that the body's natural response was beyond her control. However, her shyness was soon overcome by the desire for food. Christie brought a second piece into her mouth, closing her eyes to carefully savor every single minute aspect of this amazing culinary experience. The wine tasted even better than that collected by rich people. Why would anyone use such good wine to cook? The owner here was really an interesting man. She had forgotten that she had said she couldn't eat much. Nobody could say no to this. Carla looked at Christie and smiled. Nobody could bear to leave food unfinished here. This braised chicken and rice is to die for. Mag indeed never disappoints. It seems I can't go back to Rodu. Abraham sat there, stuffing himself with a satisfied look on his face. Ding! The fork clattered on the plate. Christie was surprised to find her plate was already empty. She licked the sauce off her lips, looking as if she hadn't had anywhere near enough. I ate all of it. A wave of guilt swept through her as she looked down at her swollen belly, but it was all she could do not to order a second helping. No, I can't eat any more, Christie told herself determinedly, shaking her head. We're just getting started, Carla said with a smile, putting down her spoon. Your tofu puddings. Enjoy. 2 tofu puddings were placed in front of them. The aroma of the tofu pudding was so pleasant that Christie couldn't help but drop her gaze to it. Reddish-orange juices had been poured on top of the tofu pudding, along with pickled vegetables, coriander, minced garlic, and chopped green onions. Delicious smells wafted towards her. What is this? She asked, surprised. Carla's lips curved in a smile. Do you remember when you told me you don't sleep well recently and that you got a few pimples on your face? Well, this dish here will help you get rid of your troubling pimples in no time. Christie's eyes widened. For real. Carla had told her many times about the effect of the tofu pudding, and her skin had become softer and smoother, but Christy couldn't bring herself to believe it was all because of a dish. She had failed to meet the projection this month. She was suffering from anxiety and insomnia. As a result, pimples appeared. Although not obvious, for girls, they were undoubtedly a disaster. She had tried many methods, but to no avail. She grew more anxious, thus leading to more pimples emerging. Now Carlos said that she only needed to finish this bowl of tofu pudding to eliminate all of them. She was surprised and skeptical all at once. This tofu pudding is why I brought you here today. You sure you don't want to try it? Carla asked. Christy debated whether to rid herself of pimples or keep her body in attractive shape. At last, she picked up the spoon. The tofu pudding slid down her tongue, and its delectable flavor instantly combined with the savory juices. The fresh sides went great with tofu pudding. After she swallowed, the faint fragrance lingered in her mouth long after the mouthful of tofu pudding was already gone. A smile curved her mouth, lighting her eyes. The tofu pudding was so refreshing after the greasy steak. Unlike the steak, the taste of the tofu pudding was mild and delicate, making her feel cheerful and comfortable. She found the bowl empty when she tried to scoop some more. Christy gave a sad look. It's so good. Before I knew it, it's already empty. Carla smiled. I know, right? This is the best thing you've ever recommended to me. No, the best I've ever eaten, said Christy. But I've eaten too much. I'll have to find a looser dress for the banquet tonight, Christy said, touching her stomach. Carla grinned. That will be a small sacrifice considering that the banquet won't offer anything better than what you have here. Christy nodded. You're right. Your stinky tofus. Mia walked over to their table, holding a big tray, on which stood 4 covered plates. She put the food down in front of them. Carla's eyes brightened. That's what I've been waiting for. She rubbed her hands together with excitement. You really don't want to try it, she asked Christy. You'll regret it. Christy shook her head. I have an important client to meet tonight. I can't eat anything with a strong smell. Besides, if I keep on eating, no dress will be large enough to cover my belly. Carla didn't press further. All right. Suit yourself. But cover your nose. The smell may be too strong for you. Mia removed the covers from the plates one by one. Disgusting smell shot up into the air like 4 volcanoes erupting. Ew! Covering their noses, Christy and Abraham jumped up from their chairs right away. Christy could feel her face turning red. She quickly took 2 steps back, and the air suddenly became pure and fresh again. She gasped for air, staring at the black food on the table in horror. The smell had been indescribable, so strong that she had felt suffocated. However, it was gone as soon as she left the table area, just as if there was an invisible barrier around it. Thinking back on it, she found the odor unbearable, but strangely not disgusting. She had no desire to sit back, though. She couldn't stand it. She never wanted to smell that stink again, let alone eat that dish. How could Carla put up with such a foul smell? And it seemed she liked it. Christy looked strangely at Carla and Harrison as they stared at their stinky tofus with greedy eyes. No. I can't run away. Abraham managed to overcome his urge to run, even though the odor was unexpected and too much. He had prepared himself for it, but clearly he had underestimated its power. Harrison and Carla were completely unaffected. Abraham watched as Carla put a piece of stinky tofu into her mouth with a blissful smile. He made himself look at the dish again. He was a foodie, and foodies would never miss out on a chance to try good food. The black stinky tofu pieces were neatly placed on a long plate. Their centers were filled with condiments, and their surface was covered in rich brown sauce, as well as pieces of coriander, thereby creating a rather alluring sight to behold. The sharp odor seemed to have faded a little. Abraham thought he found a pleasant smell in it, and it was becoming clearer and clearer. It was so stinky that it was aromatic. A look of surprise flashed across Abraham's face. After sitting himself down again, he looked at his two fellow customers stuffing themselves and brought a piece of stinky tofu into his mouth. Hot, hot, hot. Abraham's eyes went round. As soon as he bit through the crispy outer layer, the hot and spicy juice inside immediately erupted out as if hot soup had been spilled from a pot in his mouth. All he could think about at the moment was one word: hot. Yet the hot sensation lasted only for a moment, and the spicy juice began to present its unparalleled deliciousness. For a moment, Abraham wanted to spit it out. He opened his mouth, huffing and puffing. As the temperature went down, wonderful taste began to overwhelm his mouth. The crispness told him it had been deep fried. Its interior was only slightly firmer than tofu pudding, but it was so delicious and refreshing. The condiments gave extra flavor and texture to the dish. The unpleasant odor was gone without a trace. Strong and wonderful tastes spread over his tongue. Now he understood. It was so aromatic that it was stinky. Only real foodies were able to find that aroma through its stink. The aroma after the stink. The perfect balance of crispness and softness in the hot juice. It was an experience he would never forget. The taste is out of this world. I have not one regret in life. Abraham swallowed the stinky tofu with a satisfied smile. The sight made the mouths of the customers watching water. They were baffled by Abraham's sudden change in attitude towards the stinky tofu. Christy was the most shocked. After all, she had smelled that strong odor in person. She couldn't be around that stinky tofu one more second, but such a high-born man as Abraham was able to stuff his face with it. Abraham and Carla finished their stinky tofus almost at the same time. Then they both turned their eyes to the untouched one Christy had ordered. Stop looking, old man. It's mine. Carla gave a bright smile to Abraham and reached out her hand to the Christy's stinky tofu. Wait. Abraham said hastily, grabbing the plate. Hey, I know you're old and all, but that doesn't give you the right to rob me. Let go or you'll have to face the consequences of your action. There are rules here, you know. Carla stared at him malevolently, holding the plate tightly. Christy looked very anxious. It was not wise to defy a man as powerful as Duke Abraham, but she had promised the food to her friend, so she didn't know what to do. A worried look flashed across Abraham's face. He had read about the rules on the back of the menu. He knew that Mag was obstinate. After all, he was the second person who dared to refuse the king's invitation and reward. The first was Alex. The king had named him the Northwest's general, but he had refused. He went to travel the continent with a sword, so he was only the Northwest's general in name. Abraham was careful not to violate these rules. If his name were to be added to the blacklist, it would be a huge loss for him. Robbing other people's food was obviously a very bad behavior. Calm down, little girl, Abraham said with a smile. I will not rob you of your food. I just want to discuss something with you. I will not rob you of anything. But his hand didn't let go. What? You want to buy it? Carla frowned, and then shook her head. I won't sell for 10 times the price. Abraham turned to Christy standing not far from the table and smiled. I don't want to buy it. I want to make a deal with this girl. Is this stinky tofu hers? Then the decision should be in her hands. Let's see how she decides. Me. Chris was stunned. She didn't expect that Duke Abraham would have such a peaceful conversation with Carla for a stinky tofu, nor did she expect he would now hand over the decision to her. Abraham nodded. Yes. He took a look at the badge on Chris's chest and smiled. You're an employee of Buffett Banks, right? A manager? I have some money in Rodu. I started to save it 20 or 30 years ago, so there should be a lot now. If you give me this stinky tofu, I'll put that money in your bank." Christie gaped at Abraham, almost unable to believe what she had heard. There was a list of the richest people in Buffett banks, all of who were the wealthiest on this continent. Duke Abraham was ranked 10th on the list. Dragons were also rich, but they preferred to use gold and silver as mattresses rather than deposit them in banks. There were 10 dukes in the Roth Empire, and all of them had vast fiefs and countless treasures except for Abraham. Abraham had no fiefs, but he was still awfully rich. When the last king had died, he left him a huge legacy. He had not accepted any fiefs these years, but he had received countless rewards from the new king. There were many different industries under his name. No one knew how much money he had, but everyone knew that he had enough money to fill up rooms. Many employees of Buffett's bank had made a lot of special trips to Roto to visit Abraham, but he was too busy searching for food to care about them. So far, no one had been able to persuade him to deposit any money in the bank. Now, for a stinky tofu, Abraham promised to put money in Buffett banks. Even Christie, who had received many big customers, couldn't hide her excitement. She tentatively asked, "Are you serious?" Carla looked at Christie in surprise. She had known her for more than a year, and it was the first time she looked so nervous. When Christie had met her father, her expression hadn't changed at all. Who was he? Carla looked over Abraham. If he could make Christie nervous, he had to be richer than her father, much richer. Abraham nodded. "Yes, I am. I only want this stinky tofu." He looked at the stinky tofu that they were still holding. This business would not only allow Chris to exceed this year's target, but should also allow her to be promoted again, even though she had just been promoted to manager. Christie took a look at Carla, and then at Abraham, saying regretfully, "I've given this stinky tofu to my friend, I'm sorry. If you can accept half the stinky tofu, and the promise you just made remains the same, I can spare you half," Carla put in, smiling at Abraham. "Half?" There was hesitation on Abraham's face. Carla shrugged. "If you don't make a decision soon, the stinky tofu will get cold and you won't be able to enjoy the hot juice." Abraham nodded without thinking. "Deal." Surprised, Christie looked at Carla gratefully. She was so happy to have such a good friend. Carla gave her a knowing wink. Carla and Abraham then began to move stinky tofu to their plates, until there was only one piece of stinky tofu left. The two looked at each other, the atmosphere growing tense. "I'm a little girl, old man. Would you give this to me, considering I'm so lovely?" Carla pouted, trying to look cute. "I'm lovely too, so would you please give me this one?" Abraham began to blink quickly. "Carla," Christie sighed in silence. "You two ought to have your heads examined. There's only one way to do this, split it in half," said Carla gravely. "Agreed. I'll do it." Abraham borrowed a knife from Yabimiya and began to cut it carefully. Carla leaned forward and looked at it carefully for fear that her piece would be smaller. When the knife cut into the stinky tofu, the juice inside the stinky tofu flew out slowly. "No." The expression on their faces showed that they were heartbroken. Their activities attracted the attention of many guests. They even discussed the ownership of a piece of coriander on the cut stinky tofu, which many people thought was ridiculous. But they considered it important. For cereal eaters, even a shred of coriander was worth fighting for. Christie thought they were unbelievable, but her patience was as good as her mood. With the promise of Abraham, she didn't need to worry whether she could successfully persuade that rich businessman who was said to have no morals at the dinner party today. She just needed to get a written commitment from Abraham. Moreover, this deal would certainly become a classic one within the Buffett banks. A massive deposit secured by a plate of stinky tofu. After finishing his half of the stinky tofu, Abraham still craved more, but he looked in the direction of the kitchen, and then paid for Christie and Carla as well as himself. "Thank you for your kindness, Duke Abraham. I'm Christie. Out of the restaurant, Christy bowed her head in salute to Abraham. Duke Abraham. Carla blinked at Abraham, startled. She hurriedly bent her head, sticking out her tongue. I didn't know. I'm sorry for earlier, please forgive me. Abraham laughed, waving his hand. You have done nothing wrong, there's nothing to forgive. I like your attitude to food. It's a rare quality. Then he turned to Christy. How did you recognize me? Your Phyllis emerald ring. Not everyone could afford a ring like that in Chaos City. Carla gazed at Christy with admiration. You figured out who he is just by a ring. That's amazing. Abraham nodded. My money is in Rodu, so I have to send someone back to fetch it. How much do you need? Christy didn't know how much money Abraham had. The more the better, she wanted to say, but she was too shy a girl to make such a blunt request. I think I know the answer. I'll have them unlock a warehouse. Abraham beckoned his servant over with a wave, and then wrote something down on a piece of paper, which he handed to Christy after signing his name. Thank you, Duke Abraham, Christy said, excited, taking the paper with both hands. My pleasure. Come here often, and we may become friends. With that, Abraham stepped towards his carriage. He'll unlock a warehouse for you. Do you know how much money that is? Carla asked, looking at the paper in Christy's hand curiously. No, a lot, I think. Christy blew on the ink, and then put the paper away carefully after she was certain it was completely dry. She then threw her arms around her friend. Thank you, Carla. It was the least I could do, Carla said, smiling. Now that you've secured such a big deal, do you still need to see that pervert tonight? My father says he's a total A*SS. Yes, it's my job. But with this promise from Duke Abraham, I don't need to worry about anything. I won't let that pervert take advantage of me. Carla nodded. I know you won't, but I had planned to take you to the blue suede clothing store. New items came out today, I heard. Last time they launched a new dress, but they sold out when I got there. The clothes sold in their shop are fashionable and different. I've never seen anything like that before. Blue suede? I think I heard some rich ladies talking about it. Is it famous? A dress is said to have fetched 100,000 copper coins. The fight for stinky tofu between Abraham and Carla made many customers who had not been interested in the dish want to try it. 100 stinky tofus were sold out in no time, which naturally pained the customers who had eaten it yesterday. Mag pretended not to hear their complaints. The capacity of the restaurant determined the supply. Looking at them enjoying the dish they had hated when they first saw it, Mag couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement. He felt really good. At the table near the kitchen, there were 4 big men in soft armor, with long swords hanging on their waists and big glasses of beer by their hands, talking in a low voice. Have you heard? Several mercenary groups were wiped out when they were out hunting. I heard they were not killed by magical beasts. Yet. Everyone is talking about it in the Adventurers Guild. Mercenary groups being wiped out has never happened before. Many are afraid to go out. The groups that have been eliminated had one thing in common, at least one of their members was an elf. Mag slowed down what he was doing, listening carefully. Keep your voices down. I don't want to be arrested by the Grey Temple for spreading rumors. They started whispering in a hushed voice. Aren't the City Lord and the Grey Temple supposed to do something? Trust me, they are investigating. They want to catch the killers more than anyone, but I don't think it's an easy task. Mag frowned as he listened. They had set their sights on Chaos City. The elves were not safe here anymore. The mercenaries then changed their subject. Mag moved the fried rice he had just cooked onto a plate and handed it to Mia. They need to be taught a lesson. Looks like I have some killing to do tomorrow. In the eastern region of the city, a banquet was being held in a resplendent manner. 1. It's part of Chinese etiquette that you offer and receive things such as name cards with both hands. The Marquis family was not as influential as the Buffett family or the Moreton family in recent years, but it was one of the founding families of the Chamber of Commerce, and a woman in the family had married Count Boris as concubine, so their social status in the city was still high. Today's party was held at Marquis Manor. The people who came here were all well-known figures in the business community of Chaos City. They were either rich or highborn. It was said that there was also a mysterious honored guest attending, which had aroused many people's curiosity. One had to be extremely influential to be seen as an honored guest by the Marquis family. Young ladies abounded at such a party. Wives and daughters coming with their husbands and fathers, beauties who came here with various purposes. They were looking for men with power and status. Where is that girl from the Buffett banks? Where is she? A fat middle-aged man asked his servant, scanning the crowd impatiently on a chair. She made an appointment to see you 3 days ago, master. I told her to meet you at the party as you asked. She intends to persuade you to deposit money in her bank. She should be here any minute now, I think. Bart gave a snort. She is supposed to be waiting for me. That *tch. I'll teach her to slight me when she comes. If she dares to stand me up, I'll make her life miserable. Christie had already arrived, actually. She was wearing a blue dress and standing in the corner with a glass of white wine, staring at Bart's back. All the big families in Chaos City had their own freight wagons, and Bart certainly owned the most. Nearly a third of the goods to and from the city were transported by his wagons. That was what made him so important. However, Bart made his fortune in the recent 2 or 3 decades. Compared with the old families like the Moreton family and Buffett family, his influence was not nearly as great. He ran a money-up-front business, so he seldom lost money. Over the years, he had accumulated a huge amount of money. Nothing interested a bank more than money. Yet wealthy as Bart might be, the employees of the Buffett banks were discouraged from approaching him alone. The reason was very simple. Bart was a pervert through and through. He used his money as bait, duping young girls into sleeping with him, and then went back on his promise afterwards. He was one step away from getting on the blacklist of the Buffett banks. Christie naturally knew the risks, but her branch still needed another 30 million copper coins to meet the deposit target, and now it was almost the end of the month. If she had other options, she would never do business with him. She had met this kind of man before, but unlike other girls, she had never turned to tricks to get what she wanted. Now that she had Abraham's letter of commitment in her hand, although it was only part of his stashed cash, it should not be less than 30 million copper coins. She wasn't very keen to deal with a pervert like Bart. She would rather die before succumbing to his pressure. Nothing disgusted her more than an unscrupulous man who would do anything to trick a girl into his bed. Bart looked at the rich businessmen who gathered together and talked and laughed. He drank up his wine. They smiled to his face and laughed with scorn behind his back. He knew they despised him. In recent years, his freight business had grown larger and larger. The negotiation of purchasing the second largest freight company in Chaos City was almost over. As soon as the company was purchased, 50% of the freight transportation in the city would be controlled by him. Before long, even Ian and Jeffrey would show him respect. Then those guys will have to bow and scrape and lick my boots. Bart smiled sarcastically. The reason why he had come here today was not only that he wanted to trick the girl he saw before into his bed, but also that he wanted to see the mysterious honored guest. He had gotten some news about the guest. Although it hadn't been confirmed, it was enough for him to make this trip. Standing there in the corner, Christie watched Bart for a while. Then she handed her glass to a waiter, straightened her dress, took a deep breath, and walked towards him. "Good evening, Mr. Bart. I'm Christie, manager of the Buffett banks." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Christie said with a smile. Bart looked up from his wine. He smiled, carnal desire flashing in his eyes. Christie was wearing a blue dress, revealing her delicate clavicles and upper part of her cleavage. Her light golden long curly hair was loose, and the fair and slender calves beneath the dress made Bart unable to tear away his eyes. An obscene smile crossed his face. Such a beauty! His expression then changed abruptly. You said you wanted to see me, but you let me wait here for so long. Do you know how precious my time is? He asked angrily. I'm sorry, Mr. Bart. I was delayed by work. But I believe I'm still 10 minutes early. I didn't expect you to come so early. Christy had a professional smile on her face, not showing a hint of timidity. 10 minutes early. Bart laughed. I don't give a sh*t about the appointment time. If I'm here and you're not, then you're late. You should be here waiting for me. There is nothing more important than me. There was a hint of disgust in Christy's eyes, but she never let it show on her face. Bart was more annoying than she had expected. I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself, Bart said, beckoning a waiter over with a wave. You want me to put 30 million in your bank? Drink all the 8 glasses of wine, and then we'll talk business. The amount of wine in the crystal glasses might not be too much for a man, but Christy was just a girl, it was not easy for her to finish it all at one go. The waiter opened his mouth to speak, but after a glance at Bart, he closed it again. He knew better than to cross him. Christy took a look at the glasses, and then at Bart. The smile on her face was gone. Forgive me, Mr. Bart, but I have to say no. I'm not here to drink. I'm here to talk business. The high interest rate of Buffett banks will bring you great returns. It's a mutually beneficial deal. He really was a scum. Christy was filled with disgust. She had seen enough of his kind to know how to protect herself. Other girls who were green at this might have succumbed to his threat and done what he wanted, and if they couldn't hold their liquor, they would definitely find themselves waking up in Bart's bed. No. Bart suddenly looked fierce, thumping his glass on the table. Is this your first day working? Do you not know who the F***ck I am? Do as I say, or I'll see to it that you lose your job. Some people overheard their conversation and turned to look. They didn't know what the beautiful girl had done to make the notorious pervert so angry. Bart leaned closer to Christy and lowered his voice. Nobody says no to me. I own the biggest freight business. This city is running smoothly because of me. My words have more power than those of the city lord. Drink, or say goodbye to your job. Christy's hands curled into fists at her sides. She stared at Bart, her lips pressed together. People like her were no more than playthings to people like him. Her career was in his hands. Although she was a manager of the Buffett's banks, she was nothing in his eyes. Looking at the glasses, Christy hesitated. She hated him, but it took her 5 years to get promoted to the manager. She didn't want all her efforts to be in vain. The waiter felt sorry for Christy. He had seen a lot of things like this, but most of the women were much more willing than her. Bart smiled smugly. He had seen all kinds of women, and he always had a way to make them give in. The more difficult it was to tame a woman, the more he liked it. Like this woman. He was already excited. Miss Christy? Never thought I'd see you here. Right at that moment, a familiar voice sounded behind her when she was about to reach for the wine. Christy was taken by surprise. She turned around and found Duke Abraham walking towards her. Her eyes lit up. Bart looked at Abraham with displeasure. Abraham's dress looked ordinary, nothing like a high-born man would wear. Bart didn't remember seeing him. He got up angrily, looked at Abraham, and said, "Who are you? Don't you see I'm talking to her?" Abraham looked surprised. "You want to know who I am?" Bart, seeing that he seemed to be frightened, decided that he was insignificant. His face became even colder. Bart wanted to reply, but Bowen, the head of the Marquez family who had been surrounded by the crowd before, hurried over with a group of people. Ignoring Bart as he passed him, he stopped in front of Abraham and looked at him with respect and guilt. "Duke Abraham, you're here early. I should have met you at the gate." The crowd at the banquet hall turned to Abraham and came up to salute him. Many people were here today for Duke Abraham. Duke Abraham. Bart's face suddenly changed, and he was panic-stricken as he looked at the plain-looking, plain-dressed Abraham. His main purpose today was to get close to Duke Abraham and expand his freight business in the Roth Empire. He'd thought that Bowen would welcome him in with a bang, so he hadn't expected the man standing in front of him to be the Duke himself. Remembering what he had just said, Bart was unsettled, and could only hope that Abraham would not take it seriously. Fortunately, he had just spoken in a less friendly tone, and had not been too rude. Abraham nodded with a smile. "I ate early this evening and then had a pleasant business conversation with Miss Christie. Then I went for a walk. I came earlier than I expected." The eyes of the crowd fell on Christie, and they were curious what business this beautiful lady had talked with Duke Abraham to make him so happy. This lady had to be extraordinary. Some people recognized Christie, and were amazed at how quickly this competent Buffett Bank's manager had struck a deal with Abraham, who had just arrived in the city. Of course, more people were thinking about how to make use of this lady to get closer to the Duke. Could it be? Bart remembered what Christie had just said. Did she come late because she was doing business with Duke Abraham? I was hard on her. Bart's fear grew as he thought about it. I see. This lady is really young and promising. It was the Duke's first business deal after he arrived, Bowen said with a smile as he looked at Christie. The crowd laughed as well. They looked at Christie with admiration. Christie smiled back, saluted Abraham, and respectfully said, "Duke Abraham, it's great to see you again." "You too," said Abraham. Then he looked at Bart, who was slowly moving towards the back of the crowd. "Hey, you asked me who I am. I'm Abraham. I see you just had a very unhappy conversation with Miss Christie. What were you two talking about?" Bart panicked, but soon regained his composure and smiled. "Duke Abraham, Miss Christie and I were also talking business before, but we had a slight disagreement. Now I know even you do business with Miss Christie, so she must be really good at her job. Therefore I have decided to deposit 50 million at Buffett Banks." Christie looked at Bart with disgust in his eyes. She hated men like him. He wanted to deposit 50 million copper coins not because he recognized her abilities, but because he wanted to please Duke Abraham. As a branch manager, however, she couldn't turn down such an important customer, nor could she withstand the consequences of rejecting Celtic Transportation's intentions to work together. Bart looked at Christie from the corner of his eye and smiled. He was familiar with the rules of business and took advantage of other people's weaknesses. He had been only a coachman before, but now he controlled half of the cargo transport in Chaos City. He knew how to deal with people in general better than anyone present. No one could refuse the olive branch offered by the Celtic Transportation, because everyone knew that their social status was getting higher and higher. Abraham frowned at Bart. He did not like dealing with businessmen, because they were much better at pretending than ordinary people. It was difficult to see what face was hidden under their mask. Besides, they were boring. They were always busy making money, and never spent a lot of time looking for delicious food. They weren't nearly as interesting as Carla, whom he had just met at Mamie Restaurant. He would never have come for this dinner if it had not been for Bowen's invitation and the fact that he was a distant relative. He could see that it was not as Bart had said, but Christie didn't say anything. His 50 million had to be very important to her, otherwise she would not have come to the party. Abraham said nothing more. Just then, a voice sounded from behind the crowd. "Buffett Banks reject your 50 million copper coins, and from today on, we will terminate all cooperation with Celtic Transportation." When the crowd turned around, they were surprised and happy to find Shear walking slowly in a bright red dress. The dress looked familiar. It looked like the dress that Gloria had worn at the Chamber of Commerce mid-year party, but the bright red color on Sheer had a completely different feel to it. She was as authoritative and charming as a queen. The crowd could not take their eyes off her. Of course, it was even more surprising that Sheer, the head of the Buffett family, refused to do business with Bart. It was impossible that she did not know that Celtic transportation had a great influence in the city. They controlled half of the goods transport. Miss Sheer, Christie's eyes lit up. She watched as Sheer walked over to them slowly, feeling overwhelmed with excitement. If anyone at Buffett Banks had the right to reject buffet, it was Miss Sheer. Mr. Buffett could do that too, but he had retired. Christie hadn't expected Sheer to reject Bart, either. She had even cut off all business with Celtic Transportation, which was a partnership that every branch manager was trying to reach. Bart was taken aback. "What did you just say, Miss Sheer?" he asked, frowning. Sheer stood in front of Bart and looked at him calmly. "Mr. Bart, from today on, Buffett Banks will refuse all business dealings with Celtic Transportation and with you now, do you understand?" Bart's face darkened. "Do you know how big Celtic Transportation is now? By the time I finish my acquisition of Blair Transportation, more than 50% of the goods shipments in the city will be controlled by me. Are you sure Buffett Banks wants to break the partnership with Celtic Transportation?" The banquet hall was quiet, and the crowd looked at Sheer and Bart. One of them controlled cash flow, and the other controlled goods transportation. It was not common for them to quarrel with each other. Sheer smiled scornfully, and said, "Buffett Banks control 70% of the currency flow across the continent every year. It handles 10,000 times more cash than the total assets of Celtic Transportation. Our carriages are much safer and faster than yours, so how big do you think your Celtic Transportation is?" Bart looked at Sheer with his mouth open, but he could not make a sound. The veins on his forehead bulged. 10,000 times. He couldn't argue with the truth. His business was big, but compared to Buffett Banks, it was nothing. The looks on the crowd faces were various. They knew Buffett Banks were big, but they had never expected to find it this big. 10,000 times. Such a shocking number. Buffett Banks were the biggest not only in Chaos City, but on the whole Norland continent. Celtic Transportation was doing well, but it couldn't hold a candle to Buffett Banks. A girl who was not more than 18 years old, a girl who was born into a rich family and had never suffered a bit, dared to look down on and talk to him like this. A fury rose in Bart's heart. "Your business is bigger than mine, that's true, but if you just turn your partner away for no reason, I wonder how long you'll be able to maintain that success." Buffett Banks have always been known for their high-quality service. Sheer's face grew colder. "We never turn anyone away for no reason. You want to hear the reasons? You want me to tell everybody here what you have done?" Bart felt anger coiling inside him, and crushed it with his willpower. Sheer's eyes swept across the faces of everyone present. Buffett Banks welcome any cooperation, but refuse any dirty hands reaching out to its staff. If anyone touches the girls at Buffett Banks again, whoever it is, they will be blacklisted and all cooperation will be broken. In long-distance trade before, the most troublesome thing for businessmen had been the huge amount of money they needed to carry with them. They had often encountered fierce robbers and ended up losing both their lives and money. Then Buffett Banks appeared, with branches all over the continent. Their ingenious system turned conspicuous coins into a deposit slip. One didn't even need a deposit slip if one was a regular customer. Deposit information was updated in a timely manner and deposits could be drawn directly from any of the branches. This had completely solved the security issue of huge amounts of money. Although depositors had to pay a service fee, this fee was negligible compared to the high cost of escorting magicians and knights. Merchants loved Buffett Banks because their money was very safe there. In just a few decades, a banking empire that covered the entire continent and even had several branches on Dragon Islands emerged. Because there was no cash to rob and looted goods were difficult to sell, the robbers on the roads disappeared gradually. This was another contribution from the Buffett Banks. It could be said that Buffett Banks could be found everywhere on the continent, and was closely connected with the general public after launching their individual deposit and loan system. Being rejected by such a large company would be an immeasurable loss for anyone. Shear's rejection of Bart shocked everyone present. No one wanted to get on the bad side of Buffet Banks, since even such a big company as Celtic Transportation had been rejected. The girls at Buffet Banks all had outstanding looks, but from today on, no one dared to act inappropriately towards them. Christie felt tears well in her eyes, gazing at Shear gratefully. Shear had turned down a huge deposit of 50 million copper coins and a partnership with a giant in the freight industry just to tell everyone to leave the girls at Buffett's bank alone. Abraham regarded Shear with approval. The new star in the business world impressed him. He had met her several times at the palace banquet in Rodu. When he last saw her 4 or 5 years ago, she was only a 14-year-old girl. Now she had become the leader of the Buffett family, smart as before, and more authoritative. Abraham frowned at Bart. He had always despised people like him. Christie was his partner, and he didn't like to see her being taken advantage of by Bart. Bart's mood grew worse when he saw Abraham's darkened face. It seemed that his wish today couldn't be fulfilled. He looked at Christie again, his eyes full of venom. The woman made him lose face. He didn't want to stay here to be a joke, so he immediately said to Abraham, "Duke Abraham, I'm sorry, but I don't feel very well. I need to go see a doctor." "Nice meeting you." Abraham nodded slightly and said nothing. After all, this was Chaos City, not Rodu. Bart turned around and left quickly, like a dog that had lost a fight. Shear never gave another glance in Bart's direction. She turned to face Abraham and smiled. "I haven't seen you in a long while, Duke Abraham. I heard you've been eating at Mamie restaurant lately. Mag's cooking is amazing, right? Have you been there too?" Abraham asked, surprised. "Yes, Mag is an amazing chef. It was for him that I came here. I've never left Rodu before." Shear nodded with a smile. "Yes. I only go there when I am free because I have to queue early to eat there. Mag won't reserve a seat for me. Even I have to wait in the line, but the food there is well worth the wait, and I have a lot of time, so I don't really mind waiting." There was nothing better to lighten Abraham's mood than food. The rich businessmen of Chow City stood awkwardly aside, marveling at Shear's ability to change the topic, and making a mental note to visit Mamie restaurant. Duke Abraham had always been a mysterious man. He had come all the way from Rodu to Chaos City because of a restaurant. It seemed he didn't like picking up girls, so the merchants here decided to find out more about Mamie restaurant so that they had something to talk about with him. Mamie restaurant is such a fascinating place. I'm glad I went there and met Duke Abraham tonight. Christie smiled as she watched Shear and Abraham talking happily. Her business deal with Bart had taken an interesting turn. If not for Abraham, she might have been in deep trouble. Christie found herself thinking about the man who had put his big hand on his daughter's head, his gentle smile and words. What had he done to make everyone love his food so much? She decided to try that stinky tofu someday. Christie, right? So deep in thought was Christie that she never saw Shear until she was right in front of her. "Why yes," Christie said, giving her a bow hastily. She looked at Shear with respect and gratitude. "Yes, Miss Christie. I'm Christie." With a smile on her face, Shear reached out her hand to Christie, and said, "Congratulations, you have done what many of Buffett Bank's employees have failed to do for decades. You have gotten the first deposit from Duke Abraham." Christie blushed and hurriedly extended both her hands and shook Shear's hand. "I was just lucky. My meeting with Duke Abraham was accidental. I guess I should thank Mamie restaurant. It was not just luck. You earned it. Duke Abraham has told me so. Mamie restaurant is really a good place. I remember you just got promoted to manager less than 3 months ago, right?" Christie nodded. "Yes. Then stay for a full year. It's a very good position. You will learn a lot. I was in that position for 10 years. Oh, by the way, I want to add a new rule. If any employee is violated by any customer, the management of the branch will be dismissed. What do you think? Christie was taken by surprise. A happy smile showed on her face immediately. I like this new rule. Sheer nodded. Good. It's settled then. After the dinner party, they left one after another. Sheer got into the carriage. A soft glow from a golden luminous pearl illuminated the whole carriage. She looked at the middle-aged man sitting across from her holding a folder, and said, "Raise the Blair Transportation's offer by 30%." The man looked at Sheer, and said, "Young mistress, the negotiation between Blair and Celtic is almost over. I'm afraid Celtic won't accept such a sharp increase now. Any change is allowed as long as the contract is not signed. I don't care if they don't accept it." Sheer's lips curved in a faint smile. "And I believe he'll accept the offer. But young mistress, the Blair Transportation has brought great rewards to Buffett Banks over the years and is a great asset. Some people at Buffett Banks think it unwise to sell it. Those old men who don't even have the right to vote, if they like to question my decision, let them. I don't have time to explain it to them." Sheer raised a corner of the curtain to look at the street view. "They think it's a booming business, but it's going to become a sunset industry very soon. If you don't get rid of it now, you'll never get rid of it." The man looked at Sheer's face and swallowed his questions. He opened the folder and wrote something down. Sheer had the final say in every decision made in Buffett Banks. No decision she made needed to be explained to anyone, and no one could interfere with her decisions, including Ian Buffett. No one could understand why Ian Buffett had given such a power to Sheer, but all doubts had disappeared as Buffett Bank had been maintaining a rapid growth in Sheer's hands in the past 3 years. She was smart and talented, and had an unparalleled understanding of market demand. "I don't accept 50 million in deposits, but I'll charge you 50 million more and dig a hole to bury you." A faint sneer of satisfaction crossed her face. She reached out and picked up a financial report from the bookshelf beside her. The carriage was fast and steady. In a magnificent house, Bart knocked down a cabinet full of beautiful collections. "Damned B***tch, one day I'll buy Buffett Banks. I'd like to see you talk down to me again after I fully control the transportation industry." Porcelains and jadeware fell to the ground and broke into pieces. The servants stood shivering in the corner, afraid to speak. Bart smashed a few more objects before his anger abated a little. That was when a man dressed like an accountant rushed into the door. He was taken aback by the mess, but still he walked over to Bart hurriedly. "Master, I have some bad news." Bart frowned. "What?" He had a bad premonition and raised his hand to signal the servants to leave. "The Blair Transportation has raised their offer by 30%, and they don't accept any counter-offer. They give us 1 day to consider it. They want the money to be paid in full in cash," the accountant answered hurriedly. "What?" Bart's face darkened, and his eyes went round with anger. "We had a deal, how could they have changed their mind like that?" Wearing a long face, the man shook his head. I don't know. What do we do now, master? Do you still want to sign the contract?" Bart thought a moment. "Yes, do it," he said through gritted teeth. "But I'm afraid we don't have enough cash right now," the accountant said hesitantly. "We can barely come up with 150 million. Another 50,000,000. We'll have to take out a loan from Buffett Banks." Bart's veins bulged out of his head. He was well aware of his financial problem. Celtic's expansion had been too rapid recently. It might seem unstoppable, but it had been running on financial fumes. In addition to trying to take advantage of Christie, he had also wanted to talk about future cooperation with Buffett Banks, but Sheer had turned her back on him before he could. "Don't worry about money. I'll find 50 million for you by tomorrow night. We have to take over Blair. It's the most important part of my expansion plan. Get them to sign the contract now. When it's done, Celtic will have little competition in Chaos City." "Yes, master." The man hurried away. "Those bastards!" Bart kicked over a big vase and stormed out. "Can you play with Jessica tomorrow, Amy?" Mag said to his daughter, who was lying in her bed. I have to go out to source new ingredients. It's a long way and may be dangerous, so I can't take you with me. Amy sat up quickly and shook her head. If it's dangerous, you should take me with you, Father, she said solemnly. I learned a powerful spell from Master Urian the other day. I can protect you. I only have one rest day a week. I want to spend it with you, Father, please. Amy pouted, looking at Mag with a pitiable expression in her watery blue eyes. Mag felt as if his heart was about to melt. He could not utter a word of the speech he had prepared. Fine, I'll take you with me. I'll cook a roast duck for you when we come back. Mag smiled as he stroked Amy's head. Amy turned to look at Ugly Duckling, who was sleeping with its legs wrapped around her own leg. She hesitated, and said, "But Father, Ugly Duckling is still small. Why don't we eat it when it's bigger?" Mag looked at Ugly Duckling with a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "Right, I'll find a bigger duck for you." It was a dark and chilly night in late autumn. A figure jumped quietly from the second floor of the restaurant, ran all the way west, climbed over the city wall, and headed towards the mountain in the distance. The news of mercenary groups being hunted was spreading like wildfire in the Adventurers Guild. In just a few days, over 10 mercenary groups had been wiped out. No one had survived to tell what had happened. The killers didn't just target weak ones. A mercenary group with a 7th-tier magic caster had also been wiped out. The guild had yet to find out who was responsible. They had issued a notice this morning, telling everyone to be careful out there and that mercenary groups with elves in them should put their missions on hold until the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle caught the killers. The notice confirmed many people's suspicion that the killers were hunting elves. First Alex's warning, and now this notice. Fear had been aroused in mercenaries. Elves were talented archers and born healers. An elf could greatly reduce the risk of a mission, so many mercenary groups had one or more elves. They were an important part of a group. For safety's sake, some mercenary groups had stopped doing missions, and some chose to leave their elven partners in the city and take on easier jobs. Of course, there were those who believed the killers had tucked their tails and run away in fear of the authorities. They went on missions in spite of the notice. "It's not safe out there. Maybe we should wait this thing out," Sivir said solemnly to her group outside the guild. It was getting cold, but she was still wearing short leather pants, showing her thighs. A boomerang was strapped to her back. As a small mercenary group whose strength was not strong, Rose Mercenary Squad had no way to deal with emergencies. On top of that, Evan, one of their strong fighters, was an elf. "Boss, we've been out of job for 3 days now. I need money, or my family will go hungry," Minotaur Demon Dennis said reluctantly as he scratched his head. Powerful mercenary groups could hunt dangerous magical creatures and get high payment. The strongest of the Rose Mercenary Squad was just a 4th-tier magic caster. They didn't get paid well for every task. After deducting expenses, there was not much money left that could be distributed to each member. It seemed that other members wanted to take on a task as well. Mercenary missions always came with risks. Many people were killed by magical creatures every day. Evan nodded. "There are so many mercenary groups out there. As long as we don't venture out too far, I don't think we'll be unlucky enough to run into those killers. If they dare show themselves, we'll sell their whereabouts to the guild. The reward is very handsome, 1 million copper coins. Yes. Master Evan will protect us. We don't need to worry about a thing." Eva gazed at Evan adoringly. Sivir shook her head. 21 groups have been wiped out, including one with a 7th-tier magic caster. We stand no chance against such strong enemies. Her eyes swept over the crowd. "Let's take a vote. Who wants to take on a mission?" Everyone raised their hands except Scott and Sivir. Sivir nodded. "Well, let's find a mission then. An easy one. And we go where there are many other groups. It's safer this way." As they were talking, 2 figures, one big and one small, came out of the guild hall and passed by them. "Is that Mag?" Dennis asked, surprised. Scott's face lit up. It is. He smiled at the father and daughter. Hi, Mag. Hi, Amy. Mag turned around to find Sivir and her subordinates standing outside the hall armed to the teeth. He had fought by their side before, so he recognized them right away. Hi, guys, he said, smiling. Are you going on a mission today? Big Sister Leather Shorts, Uncle Bullhead, Uncle Grilled Hair, and Amy glanced at Evan and Eva and ignored them. She gave a big smile. Hello. Evan and Eva looked angry, but they said nothing since the father and daughter had saved them once. They didn't like their new nicknames, but they smiled back at Amy all the same. Yes, replied Sivir. Are you going out of the city as well? It's not safe. I'd stay in the city if I were you. Have you read the notice over there? Although they were stronger than they looked, Mag was a cook and not an adventurer, and Amy was only a 4-year-old. There were too many dangers out there for them to handle. Oh, I have. But we won't go far. We just want to look for some ingredients, so it should be safe enough. Mag looked at Evan, who had a dismissive expression on his face, and then at Sivir again. Where do you plan to go? If it's not too much to ask, could you let us tag along? It will save us the trouble of renting a horse. Sure. With you coming with us, we'll get something really nice to eat today, Dennis said with an excited smile. I'd go eat in your restaurant often, but the prices are too high for me. Scott nodded his agreement. Amy is a powerful magic caster. We will be safer with her on the team. Evan cast a glance at Mag before turning to Sivir. Captain, I don't think now is a good time to add new members to our team. We know each other well, which is why we fight well together, but we don't know their abilities. That might be a problem when it comes to fighting. Eva nodded in agreement. They're targeting elves. One more elf will do more harm than good to us. It's too high a risk to take. Sivir stood silent, thoughtful. Evan and Eva had a point. No mercenary group was safe in such a time as this, not when a 7th-tier magic caster had been killed. A mercenary group with a 7th-tier fighter was as strong as a group could get. Stronger creatures or humans seldom came looking for jobs in the guild. Great teamwork would allow a group to take down a magical beast stronger than it. As a 4th-tier magic caster, Amy was powerful. As for Mag, he was able to kill an ironhide bull with a single stroke of his kitchen knife. Sivir didn't believe he was just a cook. However, they were acquaintances at best. They didn't know them well enough to risk their lives for them. The situation might be worse than you think, Mag, said Sivir. You're an owner of a restaurant. You don't need to make money by doing missions. Risking your own and your daughter's life to go out is totally unnecessary. Mag was thankful that she was worrying about their safety, but he shook his head and smiled. I know, but I'm a lucky guy. Bad *T never happens to me. It's fine if you don't want us to tag along. Totally understandable. We'll find ourselves a horse. Come to Mamie restaurant if you have time. Mag nodded to Dennis and Scott, took Amy by her hand, and turned to leave. Mag realized his request had been a little too excessive now that he thought about it. Given how bad the situation was now, nobody in their right mind would have 2 elves in their group, even though one was a half-elf, they would easily become the killer's target. Mag had only made such a request because he considered them friends. Since they didn't want them, he and Amy would go there alone. Boss, they saved us when they had no cause to. If they go out there alone, Scott said with a worried look. Evan curled his lip disapprovingly. Yes, they saved us, but I don't want to die because of their stupidity. Do you? Sivir's brow furrowed as she watched the father and daughter leave. She hesitated a moment. Then, she quickly strode after them, calling out, Mag, wait. Come with us. Surprised, Mag stopped and gave her a smile. Half an hour later, a carriage rolled out of the city towards the wild, surrounded by 4 riders on horses. There were 8 members in the Rose mercenary squad. SAHDR was the leader, a third-tier archer whose weapons of choice were a bow and a boomerang. Scott was a third-tier swordsman. Dennis, a minotaur demon with a giant shield. He was able to use earth elements to build defensive walls for the team. Evan, an elven magic caster. Although he hadn't been a 4th-tier magician long, he was the most powerful one in the Rose mercenary squad and thus heavily protected. Eva was a not very powerful 1st-tier healer. Sydney was responsible for driving the carriage and scouting. Skol was also a 3rd-tier swordsman. Sam was in charge of setting traps. They had more scars than when Mag saw them last, but to his delight, they were all alive and well. Mercenaries died every day. The place they were going to was near Giant Canyon, which was named after dozens of huge footprints several meters long and wide in the canyon. Even forest trolls couldn't leave footprints that big, so their origin had become an unsolved mystery. Low-level magical beasts liked to roam in the canyon. Precious herbs abounded here, but they were not easy to find, because they grew on the steep cliffs or were hidden in the cracks. It was a place very popular with weak mercenary groups and herb collectors. Mag, you said there is a golden scale deer in the basin beside the giant canyon. Is your intel reliable? Dennis asked in a low voice. They all looked to Mag. They had planned to take on an easy mission, but after Mag shared this intel and agreed to catch the golden scale deer with them, they headed directly in the direction of the giant canyon. Golden scale deer were an extremely rare and precious creatures. They had gotten their name for their golden scale fur. Both their antlers and their fur were highly valued. One golden scale deer was worth at least 200,000 copper coins, which was a pretty high return for the Rose mercenary squad. I bought the intel from the guild. They have found traces of a golden scale deer's activities there, and they have seen it from afar. We have a good chance to find it there, but I can't say for sure. Mag pulled out a parchment scroll from his bag and handed it to Dennis. Mag didn't understand why they had to use such a high-quality writing material. It was the intel that he had paid 100 gold coins for, not the sheepskin. Their eyes brightened when they saw the scroll. The parchment scroll meant the intel was worth at least 10,000 copper coins, and that there were less than 10 copies. Dennis hesitated a moment before taking it in his own hand. He opened it and read carefully. Then he nodded and handed it back to Mag. The intel is good. A golden scale deer did appear there 3 days ago, and if it had been caught, we would have heard about it. Great! We'll be rich if we capture it! Sydney exclaimed excitedly. SAHDR looked at Mag, and seriously said, "You are willing to share such valuable information with us, Mag. If we do capture the golden scale deer, you decide how to distribute the catch." She had thought Mag had heard the intel from a mercenary, she hadn't expected it to be from the guild. Mag smiled. "I heard golden scale deer are not very aggressive, but they're really fast, and they can also use illusion magic to confuse predators and help them escape. It would be very difficult for Amy and me to catch it alone. If we catch it, I want the pair of antlers and half the money fetched by its pelt." Evan was displeased. "You're asking for too much considering we'll do all the work. The antlers alone are worth at least 50,000 copper coins. Talk about being greedy. Are you sure you don't need our help?" Mag asked, smiling. Evan felt uneasy under Mag's intense stare. He remembered their last meeting, his face flushing red in embarrassment. He snorted and looked away, clenching his fists. The atmosphere became a little awkward. Evan could be arrogant sometimes, admittedly, but he was not very difficult to get along with. However, he and Mag never saw eye to eye with each other. 2 antlers and half the money from the pelt. "Deal," said SAHDR. Mag nodded with a smile. "I'm sure we'll have a good time working together." There was no way Mag would go back with nothing. He was not a man to do bad deals. Everyone treated Mag with respect, except for arrogant Evan and brainless Eva. 2 hours later, a huge canyon appeared in the distance. It looked as if the massive mountain had been split in the middle by a big axe. The upper part of the mountain was hidden in the clouds. Spectacular was the word for the giant canyon. From time to time, a mercenary group would pass by. They could not help but turn to look at Amy. They had never seen anyone so little in the wild. With magical beasts lurking around, it was no place for children. They believed the girl's parents were doing a lousy job. Amy leaned on Mag's shoulder and looked around curiously. Although this was not her first time out of the city, she still found everything interesting. Fortunately, Mag's travel companions were veteran mercenaries who had been wandering through the wilderness for years. They could help Mag answer Amy's seemingly endless questions. After passing by the giant canyon, they drove on for another 5 or 6 kilometers until they reached a basin. Without magical beasts or herbs, few mercenaries would come here, and no one had ever thought to give a name to such an unpopular place. The basin was the final destination of their trip. It was a place chosen by Mag, a place near the giant canyon where many mercenaries liked, a place safe enough for any mercenary group to be willing to come with him. Mag had planned to look for a weak group with an elf to partner up with, but the Rose mercenary squad had saved him the trouble. He wouldn't look on while elves were being hunted. It was not his style. He had warned them to leave the elves alone. Clearly they were taking his warning lightly. He was here to make sure they would never the same mistake again. The basin was as good a place as any for the killers to ambush them. 2 elves with only several weak-looking people around. The killers surely couldn't resist such an easy target, so they would definitely come to him. He was using himself as bait. It was risky, to be sure, but it was the easiest way. After another 10 minutes or so, the basin appeared before them. The carriage pulled over by the edge, and Mag lifted Amy off. The basin was about 700 meters deep and surrounded by rocky cliffs which were almost vertical. There were dark caves in the cliffs. The bottom of the basin was about 1,000 meters in diameter and barely invisible. In the center was a forest of black stones in all forms and sizes. Near the cliffs stood many small patches of coniferous trees. Now and then, Mag could hear the sounds of birds chirping and animals howling echoing off the cliffs, but no one was in sight as far as he could see. "Wow, such a huge bowl!" Amy exclaimed happily as she looked over the edge. She then extended her arms and was about to jump down. Thanks to Mag's quick eyes and hands, he caught her just in time. The Pope had given her wings to fly, but Mag wanted her to keep this a secret. Only Krasu and Urian and a handful of other people knew about this ability of hers. Mag didn't want his new companions to find out what they were capable of yet. A gust of wind came up from the basin, carrying chilly moisture. Despite himself, Evan shivered. Why would golden scale deer want to come to this sh*thole? Don't they like places warm and dry and full of sunshine? I've come here twice and never found anything valuable, said Sam. But the basin does have sunlight every day, albeit for no more than half an hour around noon. Mag thought a moment. Maybe that's when the golden scale deer will appear. They nodded. It was worth a shot. Only one way to find out, Sivir said. Come on, guys, let's search the basin first. She tied the horses and started to descend carefully along a narrow road. Mag looked around. His eyes stopped on a stone mountain. He smiled thinly and followed Sivir down with Amy in his arms. In a dense forest, there was a house hidden well by trees. A demon rushed into the door excitedly. Boss, good news. A small mercenary group has just entered the basin near the giant canyon. Our watchman saw 2 elves, one was a male, the other a little girl. The girl is top grade. She might be worth more than all the elves we have caught these days combined. The Ghost Lights demon who was molesting a naked female elf stood up right away. He tossed his plaything aside while excitedly asking, "No kidding?" The process of searching in the basin was boring. There were few animals, let alone magical beasts. Occasionally they could hear the sounds of pheasants and rabbits scurrying about. Even so, they trod quietly and cautiously. Because in this wilderness, magical beasts were not the only creatures that were deadly. A venomous bug could cause death as well. The damp and dark basin abounded with snakes and spiders and scorpions. It was quite uneventful, all things considered. A python over 10 meters long pounced out of its lair towards them, but Amy had been waiting for something like that to happen. She burned it into a crisp the moment it appeared. Sivir walked in front, holding a torch, with Scott and Skol to her left and right. Mag, Amy, Evan, and Eva came next. Dennis brought up the rear with his huge shield. Monkey jumped from tree to keep watch, using different whistles to convey different messages. They searched the whole place. Finally, after an hour, they found a soft golden scale shining golden in the torchlight near a huge rock. Sam looked over the scale closely. It's from a golden scale deer, I'm sure. I saw one once when I was young, but it got away when I tried to catch it. Its scales were just like this one. Great! Looks like the intel is correct. This place is probably the haunt of that golden scale deer, Dennis said excitedly, rubbing his hands together. They all wore excited faces. Mag took a closer look at the rock. Its surface was more than 100 square meters. There were golden lines in the white rock, shining in the torchlight. It couldn't be valuable, though, or else it would have been carried out of this basin, even though the cliffs were over 600 meters high. In the middle of the boulder's surface, there was a pit filled with crystal clear water, shining like a pearl. Is this where it drinks? Amy asked curiously. Probably. Maybe it likes the water here, Mag answered. Then let's stay here and wait for it to come. Sivir smiled. It might be easier than she had expected. Sam put his huge pack on the ground. I'll set up the snares. I let one escape, but never again. Mag took a look at his watch. It's an hour and a half till noon. We need something to eat. I'll see to it. He then walked towards a cave with a few pheasants he had caught. From this vantage point, he could see everything. Amy quickly followed after him on her short legs. With the help of everyone, the traps were set up one by one in no time. They were so artful and ingenious that even Mag couldn't help but marvel at them. Sam obscured their tracks and obliterated their scent. When he was done, everything was as it had been before they came here. Each and every trap was well hidden. Looks like we still have time to fill our bellies, Mag said as they climbed into the cave. Dennis took a deep breath. Smells so good. If we were rich, we would definitely hire you as our cook, Mag. Their mouths started watering as they looked at the brown pheasants hanging over the fire and the white pheasant soup in the pot. They wondered where he had gotten the pot, but they were too hungry to ask. Evan's mouth craved the food, but he said, I brought my own meal. Eva tore her eyes away from the pheasants. Yet. We don't need your pheasants. Mag ignored them completely. I cooked 8. We each can have one. There is soup in the pot if you want some. Mag handed them each except for Evan and Eva a bowl, and gave a pheasant to Amy. Mag had never taken the two jerks into consideration when he was cooking. Evan's face twitched in anger. It was all he could do not to fly into a fury. Have some fruits, Master Evangelist. Eva pulled out a mandarin from her bag, peeled it, and handed it to Evangelist. I'm not hungry, Evan said with a long face, knocking the mandarin out of her hand, which then rolled onto the ground with dirt all over it. Eva pulled back her hand, embarrassed. There was not even a hint of anger on her face, though. She looked at Evan obediently. The rest of the Rose mercenary squad gathered around the fire, sitting on stones. The smell alone was enough to whet their appetite. They always packed some cold and dry food when hunting. Roast pheasants were something they didn't dare hope for. On top of that, Mag was now the most famous cook in the whole city. Sivir looked from Evan and Eva to Mag. She hesitated a moment before sitting down. Then she took a pheasant, smelled it, tore off a leg, and took a bite with a smile. The skin was crispy, and the meat was succulent. It had been cooked to perfection. Her taste buds danced wildly as she bit into the meat. Sivir's eyes brightened. It's so good. It was as good as the roast beef Mag had cooked last time. Pheasants were common in the wild, but even the pheasants cooked by Sam, their best cook, couldn't hold a candle to this. To think Mag had made the pheasants so delicious in such a short time and with such simple equipment. My goodness! Mag, you must be the god of cookery. No one in this world can cook as well as you. If we catch the golden scale deer, I'll be sure to eat in your restaurant. Count me in. They complimented Mag as they ate, smiling blissfully. Mag was glad that they liked his cooking. He was in a good mood, nobody hated praise. They finished the soup, not even bones were left. They belched in satisfaction. A ray of sunlight fell on the edge of the basin and began to move towards the center. At the mouth of a cave, a deer appeared, shining golden. Look! Over there! A lone deer! Amy whispered, pointing at the cave in the opposite cliff with her small finger. Sam's eyes lit up. That is a golden scale deer. He was very excited, but he managed to keep his voice down. Hide! The golden scale deer is very wary and timid. If it sees us, it will probably not come here again. This is an adult golden scale deer, and its fur looks very beautiful. They quickly hid behind rocks, peeking at the deer, wonderstruck. Mag was also surprised. The deer was about the same size as an ordinary sika deer, but its body was covered with a layer of golden scales. Resembling fish scales, they were shining with dazzling light. The curved horns were glittering as if made of pure gold. It attracted all eyes as soon as it appeared. Sunlight patches slowly moved forward on the ground. The dark basin was illuminated, the humidity was suppressed by the sun, and small animals came out of the safety of their caves, looking up and enjoying the short sunshine. The boulder caught the sunlight as well, shining as if sprinkled by gold powder. The water in the pit glinted brightly. The big black eyes of the golden scale deer scanned around with vigilance. It waited for more than 10 minutes, until the sun covered the whole basin, and then it carefully jumped down from the steep cliff. There were only a few protruding rocks on the nearly vertical cliff, but its hooves managed to find them with every step it took. Its steps were light and graceful, like those of a fairy. After the golden scale deer landed on the ground, it stopped, its erect ears moving. It looked around for a while, and then walked to the boulder warily, stopping every few steps. Sam has set up many traps, but we can't take any chances, Sivir said in a hushed voice. Get ready. Try not to damage its horns and pelt. They are the most valuable. She put a hand on the boomerang. They held their weapons in hands, never letting the deer out of their sight. Their cave was about a dozen meters above the boulder. It was the perfect spot to ambush their target. Let's do it! Amy said excitedly, 2 fireballs dancing in her hands. Mag touched her head. No, sweetheart. Your fireballs are too hot, you'll toast it. Amy thought a moment. What about this? 2 blue balls of icy flames emerged from her palms. They could feel the air temperature quickly. They gasped with admiration when they saw the icy flames. She could cast such powerful magic at so young an age. Her potential was simply unimaginable. They couldn't imagine how strong she would become when she grew up. Loath as he might be to admit it, Evan sensed energy in the flames so powerful that he felt terrified. He might be a mid-level magic caster, but he wasn't capable of working such a powerful spell. A 4-year-old was doing something he couldn't. Rage and frustration overwhelmed him. All bad enough, but she was a fire-type magic caster as well as an ice-type one, and that made it worse. Mag said nothing as he looked at Amy's icy flames. No other skills were more suitable to take the golden scale deer down than this. After all, ice wouldn't hurt its fur or horns. Mag had leveled up to a 6th tier knight last night with the help of a flash of lightning. However, it was not wise to reveal his strength right here and now. Of course, he couldn't wait to test his power on some scum now that he had become much stronger. The deer was getting closer to the rock, and thus closer to the traps. They tensed their muscles. Scott and SKOL were ready to jump out. Sivir raised her boomerang. She looked as if she would throw it any minute now. There was nothing strange about the dirt around the boulder. It was as damp as ever, with several dry fallen leaves on it. The deer sniffed at the dirt and raised its head to look at the water. It hesitated a moment and took a cautious step. Suddenly, the ground caved in, revealing a deep pit underneath. "We got it!" Dennis exclaimed happily. "Not yet," said Amy. "It's hanging on the edge." Amy was right. The golden scale deer didn't fall straight into the pit as expected. Its forehooves caught the edge and stopped its fall. "Let's go," Sivir ordered. She grabbed hold of a vine and rappelled down right away, throwing the boomerang at the poor animal's forelegs. SKOL and Scott followed right after her. Evan stood up and started reciting an incantation. His staff glowed blue at the top. Then he pointed it at the trap, and an ice cover began to form over the pit. However, before SKOL and Scott reached the ground, the golden scale deer jumped out with a beastly growl. Crack! The ice cover broke before it was completely formed. The boomerang whistled inches past the deer's behind and sank into the dirt. The instant the deer landed, the ground caved in again. A net from nowhere came straight at it, and inside the pit, a big iron cage was waiting. Only when one could think of every possible eventuality could one be called a trap master. Sam was born into a hunter family. The tricks of setting up traps that had been passed down from his ancestors were not enough to take down powerful magical beasts, but they would be adequate to capture normal animals and small magical creatures. Of course, this golden scale deer was not willing to give its life to them without a fight. Anger rose in its eyes as it looked at the boomerang flying towards it, two humans rushing over with swords, and ice walls rising in all directions. The golden scale deer made a shrill cry, and all of a sudden all of its scales stood up. With the help of the sun, the scales radiated dazzling golden light in all directions. The big net made of rope turned black instantly as if it had been burned by a fire. The ice walls were cut into pieces. They avoided those golden lights reflexively, but their movements were very slow. It seemed that they were seeing something strange. Some people stood there, motionless. Mag was surprised. He took a look at Evan, who was standing still holding up his staff, and evil with a glazed look in her eyes. This is illusion magic, it seemed his spiritual power was too strong to be affected by it. "They are not moving," Amy exclaimed. "It's amazing, but the deer is getting away." The magical beast barely managed to climb out of the trap, lame in the right front leg. Although he was surprised that Amy was not affected by the illusion magic, Mag took a look at the golden scale deer that had already run dozens of meters in the blink of an eye, and quickly said, "Can you catch it, Amy?" Amy nodded. Sure. She then stretched out her finger and pointed it at the deer ready to climb the cliff. "Stop right there, little deer," she called out. The galloping beast stopped moving right away as if frozen in time, its forelegs hanging in the air. Mag's eyes went wide. He had thought Amy would use an ice spell, but this spell was clearly much more powerful. This skill of hers had made all the preparations, traps, and the Rose Mercenary Squad's attack look like a joke. "Master Urian taught me this. It's called Cold Domain. Nothing can move in the domain," Amy said with a look that was saying praise me. "Well done," Mag said with a smile, stroking her head. Amy was a natural with magic. It seemed she could master any spell, no matter how difficult. Normally only magic casters above level 7 could do domain magic. Without enough understanding of magic and certain talent, magic casters couldn't even understand what the domain was. Amy was only a 4th tier magic caster, but she was already able to work such a difficult spell. If this news got out, it would definitely cause another sensation. The illusion magic was broken as the golden scale deer was captured. For a moment, the Rose mercenary squad looked confused as if not understanding what had just happened. Sivir was the first to grasp the situation. "Crap, the deer," she called out when she saw the traps were a mess and empty. The other members of the Rose mercenary squad looked depressed when they realized that they had been under the influence of the deer's illusion magic. They thought their target had long since gotten away. "Don't worry, I have caught it, the deer is right over there," Amy said, pointing. They were shocked when they saw the beast standing there like a statue, its forelegs raised up and hind legs bended. How is that possible?" Evan was as stunned as he was ashamed. He was beaten by a 4-year-old. There was no sign of ice, no sign of the deer having struggled, no sign of anything. It had to be a powerful spell to immobilize the deer so easily. And the spell's caster was none other than Amy. "I seem to recall you saying you'd do all the work, old man," Amy said with a smile, looking at Evan who was still sulking. Embarrassed, Evan snorted and looked away. Eva opened her mouth and closed it, glaring at Amy silently. Mag's mouth curved in a gloating smile. There was nothing more satisfying than watching his daughter show off her power. "It can't move, but it's not dead, tie it up," Mag said to Sivir. Right. Sivir removed from her waist a roll of rope with some kind of sigil on it, walked quickly to the golden scale deer, and tied it up securely. She then placed it on its side on the ground. The rope had been enchanted. It was called spirit binding rope, a very common piece of equipment for mercenaries. The beast bound by the spirit binding rope would lose the ability to struggle. Therefore, it was very handy when the creature had to be caught alive. The deer groaned desperately. It struggled, but to no avail. Sivir smiled and stood up. "It's so cold," she said, rubbing her hands together. The temperature around this area had dropped significantly because of Amy's magic. "We did it, thanks to Mag and Amy. We have finally caught this third-tier magical beast, which is the most difficult to catch," Dennis said, excited. "I underestimated its illusion magic," said Sam, "and my traps didn't work." They looked down in wonder at the golden scale deer from the cave. It was worth as much as a normal 6th-tier magical beast. That was when they heard a shrill laugh. "A male elf, not bad, oh, and a small one, me likey." Mag looked up and saw a bunch of people at the edge of the cliff. The laughter was like that of a demon, echoing off the cliffs. The Rose mercenary squad clenched their weapons as they looked up, shocked. There were 7 figures on top of the cliff. Although Sivir couldn't see their faces clearly, she could still make out that they were a team of demons, orcs, and forest trolls. The one in the middle, who was tall and covered by green flames, was giving off a terrifying aura. "Prepare to fight," said Sivir gravely. She held the boomerang tightly in her hand, her eyes never leaving her foes. Among the mercenaries, there was an old saying, "Magical beasts are not nearly as fearful as mercenaries." A weak mercenary group's days were numbered once it got targeted by a strong one. Fortunately, under the management of the City Lord's Castle and the Grey Temple, mercenaries rarely fought with each other. If 2 mercenary groups had a conflict over a magical beast, it was often settled by a fair duel. Clearly these guys were not after their newly caught golden scale deer, though. "Who are they, what do they want?" Eva asked, her face pale and voice shaky with fear. Evan couldn't hide the terror in his eyes. "They want to kill us." Fear enveloped the Rose mercenary squad as they remembered the horrible bodies carried back to the city. Mag looked up. His vision was much better than that of normal people. He looked at the demon that was aflame. "He is an 8th-tier demon, I think." Then his eyes swept the rest of the group. Most of them were at level 6 or 7. A group as this was unstoppable, unless they ran into someone at level 9 or above. Judging from what the demon had just said and how powerful they were undoubtedly the ones responsible for the slaughter of mercenary groups. They were an evil group hunting elves. "Could you not laugh? It hurts my ears," Amy called up, covering her pointy ears with her hands. The laughter stopped abruptly. The ghost light demon glared down at Amy with blood-red eyes, the flames enveloping his head dancing violently. "And do you mind covering your face? I've never seen anything uglier," Amy continued, her voice full of distaste. The ghost light demon was furious. "I like you, kid, but I'll make you wish you were dead if you make me angry with that." The demon took a step forward and jumped down. Shrouded by flames, he looked like a ball of fire. The rest of his group charged down as well. SAHDR didn't panic. "Monkey, signal flare," she ordered calmly, her hand clenching tighter around the boomerang. Monkey fumbled in his clothes with his shaky hand and drew out a small device made of a length of bamboo. It had the Grey Temple's crest on it. He pulled the string underneath and fired the flare. A fireball shot up into the sky and exploded with a loud bang, producing a bright red flame. "Are you out of your goddamn mind provoking him like that?" Evan yelled at Amy, his face twisting in anger. "Now we're all dead," Mag stepped in front of his daughter. "Don't you talk to her like that, she's not a coward, unlike you," he shouted, contempt in his eyes. This elf was worse than he had thought. *CKU, Evan raised his magic staff, shining blue on the top. SAHDR looked over her shoulder at Evan angrily. "Shut up, Evan, prepare to battle." Picking a fight with a teammate when facing dangerous enemies, he was not only a coward, he was as stupid could be. "Would you like a taste of my fireball, old man, or maybe my icy flames?" Amy asked, smiling. Evan put his staff down reluctantly. He looked at the ghost light demon coming down from the sky. The fear was so overwhelming that his will to fight was completely gone. Boom! The demon landed dozens of meters away from the Rose mercenary squad, shaking the ground, sending rocks flying off the cliffs, and raising a cloud of dust. SAHDR swayed a little before steadying herself. The golden scale deer had literally been scared to death. Dennis was standing before everyone else, holding his shield. The shock wave smashed into the shield, sending him falling back 2 steps. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. It was all he could do not to fall down. Stones cracked under his feet as the demon made his way to them slowly. They couldn't see him because of the dust cloud, but their fear was growing more intense with every step he took. Given the fact that he had jumped directly from the cliff hundreds of meters high, he was at least at level 7 and his body was strong. The Rose mercenary squad never thought today would be the day they died. At last, the footsteps stopped, and there, in front of the Rose mercenary squad, stood a demon covered by green ghost flames, his body dry and dark as a mummy. The blood-red eyes in the skull covered by a layer of skin were staring at them. "You're fools to think that the Grey Temple will save you. They'll find nothing but bodies when they come here. The situation couldn't have been worse. You're weaker than the old man we captured the other day. Apparently Chaos City has nothing but weaklings, but you guys have balls, I'll give you that. That male elf may not be worth a lot, but that small one will definitely fetch a fortune. Let's get her to an auction and make a killing. And we've got ourselves 2 broads, I like the well-endowed one, and by the look of her, she'll be more durable than the ones we found the other day, but that one won't last a day, I think." The orcs and trolls smiled lasciviously at SAHDR and Eva after arriving at the scene. The Rose mercenary squad were angry and scared, but they stood their ground. Scott and SKOL stared at their enemies, swords in their hands. Dennis stood in front, holding his giant shield. Eva edged closer to Evan and clutched at his clothes, her face pale as paper. However, Evan, who was surrounded by his team members, shoved Eva to one side, ran to the ghost light demon, and knelt. "Please, don't kill me," he called out in a scared voice. "I surrender, they are all yours, but please don't kill me."